right at or a little bit past 6:30, so I'm going to call tonight's workshop to order. And I'd like to invite everybody, just want to note roll for the record, please. I'd like to invite everyone to rise and join us for the Pledge of Allegiance. Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. So given the large attendance tonight for tonight's workshop session, maybe just a couple of thoughts about our workshop session. So tonight we are in workshop format. It's why we are up here and not downstairs in council chambers. Tonight is an informal working session of council for us to consider the items on the agenda. I think of top concern tonight or of top interest is items related to our 2025 planned budget. So tonight is again just a workshop session. It is again intended to be quite informal. It is an opportunity for council to hear some feedback from members of the public, also hear presentation from staff, ask questions, and help to make some kind of move our discussion along before we come to any official budget action. So we will not be taking any votes tonight. Tonight is not for any official decisions. It is indeed just a working session of council, but you all are very welcome to be here. We're glad you're here. We do have open forum on the agenda this evening. Typically we take open forum at the beginning of any meeting. Given the topic tonight, I would propose that we allow for some open forum comments if anybody wanted to make some comments right off the bat. Have a time commitment. Otherwise, I would also suggest that we go through our presentation, give you some information that is in the presentation, and then reopen an open forum after you have just a little bit of additional information. It might help make for a better informed open forum and might help kind of guide some of your questions. It's a little bit uncustomary for us to take this approach, but it's one of the benefits of us just being, again, in this little bit more informal working session. Staff, are we okay kind of with that approach? Council okay with that approach? All right. With that, if there's anybody that has any time commitments or wanted to kind of speak right off the bat, I'd open up open forum and welcome you to either kind of rise, and we've got a table here in the middle if you wanted to make some comments. Otherwise, we can go through the presentation and also open up open forum a second time. I would like to. Yeah, please. And if we could just state your name and address for the record as well, and we're glad you're here.
Absolutely. So my name is Jessica Johnson, and I'm choosing to speak now because I'm not here on this subject matter in particular.
Okay.
I'm actually a resident of Stillwater, and I have stepped up to represent Forest Lake districts or precincts 1 and 3 in the state house. And so I'm just here to introduce myself, offer my phone number in case anybody would like to reach out to me. My number is 612-644-9430. And I welcome anybody to give me a call, let me know what their biggest concerns are in the state, ideas on how we might be able to come together and fix those issues, and just let you know that the incumbent whom I'm running against, his voting record is available for everybody to look at. I think you may be concerned that he is not representing a majority of the community, and so that is why I stepped forward, because I don't feel like I'm being represented, and I believe that many of us would agree there. So again, please reach out and give me a call and chat with me if you so will. Yeah, thank you so much.
What are you running for?
State House for District 33B, which is Forest Lake's precincts 1 and 3.
What's your name again?
Jessica Johnson. Thank you so much.
Glad you're here. Is there anybody else that would like to speak in open forum now? Otherwise, if you're just coming in, we will also take some public comment after staff's presentation. Is there anyone else that would like to speak now? All right, let's move into our agenda then, and we will again reserve some additional time for some public comment later in the agenda. With that, we're going to start with our 2025 budget fund budget and tax levy discussion. And Kevin, please.
Thank you, Mayor and members of the City Council. Do have a presentation here for you going over the city's 2025 preliminary budget. is going at a high level overview of what was included in your packet. So please feel free to stop me along the way if you have any questions, and at the end of it, I'm happy to dive into any further questions that you have as well, or give the opportunity for you to ask staff any questions you have on the budget as well. So with that, I'll just start by reviewing our budget calendar. And before I get on kind of how the rest of the year looks, I want to remind council and members of the public what we have done so far to get up to this point. So we started our budget process earlier than we have in years past. And it started with getting the city council's budget priorities and total tax levy kind of ceiling that they would like to see this preliminary levy brought in at. So that was something new that the staff took on this year, as well as you members of the city council, which helped bring all this information for you at this meeting tonight. We also had a staffing study where we looked at staffing needs of the city and where needs are not only for 2025, but projections for the next 10 years. And that was presented as well in the 10-year staffing study plan. And those staffing positions have been incorporated into this preliminary budget. We also had presented the capital plan twice to City Council. With that, we implemented a new capital planning software where the intent was to provide more details to City Council on the front end so they can have tools on their hands so they know what projects are coming, not only in the short term, but also the long term, and have those details readily available for you so you can review those and ask any questions that you have for City Council. And then also just about a month ago, the city also put together a financial management plan where it incorporated the staffing plan, the capital plan, and then also the operating projections of the city. And the one big plan to summarize where the city is at projected this year and where we're at in the future with different assumptions being made so we can see how decisions being made today affect where the city wants to be in 2 years, 3 years, and even 10 years down the road. So with all that, it brings us to tonight, where it's the first look at the whole citywide budget in a whole for tonight's meeting. So looking ahead at the September 9th City Council meeting, at that meeting we'll be looking for any final direction that City Council would have after tonight for the September 23rd meeting, where City Council will be required to adopt a preliminary tax levy, as we need to submit this amount to the county by September 30th. As a reminder to City Council and also for members of the public, the number that is submitted by September 30th to the county cannot be increased, but it can be decreased. We also will discuss tonight if council would still like to hold a budget open house, what the format would look like, and also timing of that. And then the last big meeting here is on December 9th, where we will hold the truth and taxation public hearing, and then also look for adoption of the 2025 tax levy and 2025 budget. So this high level overview, what is a budget? It's really our number one policy document and annual financial document as well. Like I said, with all the plans that we incorporated with the staffing plan and capital plan, it brings all those together to include all the operating and capital costs that the city has. And also provides that level of service that we provide to our residents. As we've communicated to the council before, this is also a document that rating agencies look at when the city is issuing debt, which the city just did for some equipment certificates. So with all the 10-year plans that the city council has been presented in this budget, it's really important to have these documents in place for those rating agencies, as it does improve the city's interest rates on those debt issuances. And with the budget, the goal is to provide the best service in the most efficient manner and at the lowest cost in the community. So with that, we will start with looking at the general fund revenues and where the different categories that they fall into. As you can see on the top line is the property tax revenue, which is the largest revenue source for the city's general fund, and that's showing an increase of 9.7%. This also makes up about 83% of the total revenue in the general fund. You can see going down the line the different other categories of revenue, and there isn't significant change dollar-wise to these revenue sources. So this points out to City Council, the residents, that most of the funding in the general fund, which is the operations of the city, come from the general levy. This slide summarizes the expenditures by department in the city. And you can see that total expenditures are increasing 8.2%. I was referencing back to the revenue side. Revenues also went up 8.2%. So really, after the city reviews all the other general fund revenue sources in the city, besides that general fund tax levy, that general fund tax levy is really put in there to balance the budget, where our expenditures equal our revenues. The one item I wanted to point out on this slide, as we're going with some more details on the other increases on some future slides, is that bottom line contingency fund of $250,000. This is to keep up with our general fund balance policy of 50%. As the city is balancing our budget and projecting revenues and expenditures to equal, our expenses are consistently rising, and our policy is to maintain that fund balance at 50%. Where if we keep coming in equal, our fund balance will be dipping below that 50%. So right now we have $250,000 budgeted in there just to keep up with our city policy of 50% in the general fund.
Kevin, can I just pause you for a second? That number is sometimes counterintuitive as to why it's so high. And I just point out and remind everybody that the city receives property tax revenue 2 times a year from the county. Once is in May, and the second is in November. And because those all of that revenue only comes in 2 bulk pieces, and it comes in midway through the year, it's one of the primary reasons why we're required to keep that fund balance at 50% of those annual expenditures. It's because, again, that timing, we don't have constant revenue per week or per month. It's those 2 primary times throughout the year, which really puts an emphasis on why you need to have that fund balance.
So this slide summarizes those same expenditures. On the previous slide, this breaks it down by category. You can see those on the left-hand side. You can see here that it equals an 8.2% increase in total expenditures. The one item on here that is, looking at it, you can see the repair and maintenance and other expense has a 41.9% increase. That is where that contingency line item of $250,000 is included. So that is making up the majority of that increase in that line. And then if you look at the other line items for expenditures, they're remaining very consistent and very small minimal increases, with the exception of the wages and benefits. We're going to get the details on the next slide of what's making up that increase, but that is for some new positions that have been put in this budget, as well as just the normal cost of living increases and increases with benefits that have been negotiated through labor union contracts. So one of those positions being proposed and in this budget is a planning and EDA supervisor. This position is funded through different funds. 50% is included in the general fund, and 25% is included in the EDA fund, which is also supported by a tax levy, and then 25% is included in the airport fund, as this position would oversee the airport and serve as the airport manager as currently proposed. This planning and EDA supervisor would be a second in charge to the community development director, and would oversee 2 positions, the current zoning administrator, and there's also an administrative assistant. And as in our staffing plan, there is a future code enforcement position proposal. This position would oversee that position in the future if it is approved. This would really take over and open up some time for your community development director to focus on more economic developments and activities, and take some of that work away from that position. The next position, there are 2 part-time CSO officers or community service officers in the budget. This has been some positions that have been proposed many years prior to this year in front of City Council. They're again asking for those 2 part-time CSOs for 2025. And it would really be a benefit to our police department. It could take some of the calls away from our police officers that are maybe are a little bit lower, like lockouts, complaints, neighbor disputes, things like that. They can also help out with some code enforcement issues as well that are being seen in the community. So it's really seen as a position that can wear a few different hats, help out different departments, but also take some of that pressure off our police officers so you can be out there dealing with some more bigger issues in the community and being able to service to the community. The third position that is included in the budget is a training captain in the fire department. This has been talked about for many years, so the fire department does not have a second in command. It is currently just a fire chief. So this position will really take on a pivotal role with training in the fire department, but also serve as helping with public awareness at community events as well with the public, and also serving as really that compliance leader and helping with being the second in command for our fire chief. It is noted that right now this position is in the budget and supported by an increase in the general property tax levy. The city has applied for a grant to fund this position, and as to date, the city has not heard it has been awarded that grant. We do anticipate that we should hear by that preliminary levy date, but that would fund this position for 3 years if approved. Some of the other expenditures causing for some increase in that general fund property tax levy is the $250,000 contingency budget. As discussed previously, this is to maintain that 50% fund balance policy that the city has. There is also an increase in council training and associated mileage for that. There hasn't been the League of Minnesota Cities offers some annual trainings for mayor and city council members that are a great benefit to you, and there hasn't been a budget associated with that. So this would give that budget opportunity for you to attend those trainings. Coming out of the staffing study that was done with EDA, there's also $30,000 in the budget for a class and compensation study. This is really important, not only to attract employees and make sure we're paying competitive, but also to keep the employees that we have at the city here. So it's really a good tool to review every so many years and have to make sure that the city is keeping up with the market. There's a $54,000 increase for the city's insurance, which covers property, liability, auto, and workers' compensation insurance. The city did have a valuation done this year on all of our buildings done by the league, so that having some increase to make sure we're insuring our buildings at the proper value, and it's also the general increase in rates that we're seeing with everything in insurance.
Good question.
Yeah.
That line item on insurance, that took a big jump last year as well, is that correct?
It did, yeah. We're working on getting the quote from the league right now. All the stuff, all the items have been submitted to the league with that, so that is just a general percent increase where we believe it's going to fall in at. It should not hopefully be as big as it was last year, but last year saw a bigger increase in this. If I remember correctly.
Okay. Thank you.
There's also a $33,000 increase for legal expenses. This is as the city has been seeing an increase in legal costs over the last 2 years. It is also important to note though that 2025 budget is still projected to be less than 2023 and 2024. The city has also put in $25,000 in the budget for removal of city-owned ash trees. A lot of the ash trees in the city that has been previously discussed in some work sessions with council are dying, and there's a need to get these city-owned trees removed. So there's been some dollars put in the budget to assist with removal of those trees. On the other side, there's a $50,000 decrease in the golf course budget in the general fund. Based on the contract that the city has, the city is required to make up a $50,000 net income to the contract out there. Based on the performance of where the golf course is projected to be at, we're not expected to be making that payment, so they removed that from the budget. So moving on to the tax levy in the whole. So this will be went over with the general fund and then incorporating all the other levies that are associated with the city that are going back to the capital plans that have been presented to council and also the debt levies as well. You can see at the bottom we're just under $17 million wise and at a 13.39% increase. If we look back to when we met for council priorities and direction from the city council, it was given that we should be under 14.36% as it was presented last year and approved last year in the 10-year capital plan. So with reviewing all the changes and that have occurred since that date and looking at capital needs and incorporating all the priorities of city council, the city staff has come in under that levy amount that was communicated to us back in April. This is just a graph of where those levy dollars are going. You can see that the largest chunk of about 66% is in the general fund, which is really funding the city operations and day-to-day activities of the city, and as well as what the level of service that we want to provide to our residents. From there, you can see about 15% is related to our current debt obligations that we are paying, that are required to be paid back. And then the larger chunk is our capital needs that the city has, whether it's streets, equipment, and park related makes up the next biggest chunk of that levy, total levy. This graph shows where the total tax levy for the city has been going back 10 years. You can see that we've been having an increase over the past few years, and just summarizes where the city has as it has grown over the past 10 years. So taking into consideration what the levy is and what our proposed values are going to be from the county, we always take a look at tax rate. And there's a big decrease in 2023, as we remember, going back to a significant increase in values. And now those values have stabilized for the most part. So as it sits right now, the city is looking at a tax rate of about 41.2. And that is in line with pretty much in line with where we have been historically, taking out those two outlier years of 23 and 24 where the market is correcting itself. So taking into consideration the tax levy and those values, if you look at the average home value in the city of Forest Lake, the increase just for the city taxes, and I want to stress that this is just a city tax portion. This is not any county tax levy increase or any school district levy or any other special levies that are seen on the tax statement. The average home value in the city of Forest Lake, you'll see an increase of $185 for the full year, which comes down to about $15 per month. One thing that the city likes to do as well, we have a list of comparable cities that we like to compare ourselves to see where are we at in consideration of some other comparable cities. What are they doing with their tax levy? So I was able to gather by going to each city's websites and taking information that was available from there, as a lot of cities are having their budget workshops right now or already had them. As you can see, there are a few blanks up there. That's because the information was not available and they haven't had their meeting yet. But if you look at where the city of Forest Lake is in comparison to others, with this increase in levy that's currently proposed, we're right in the middle or on the low end of our comparable cities as well. If you look at the 24 levy, it goes from lowest to highest, and as it currently sits, City of Forest Lake is sitting right where we were in '24 with this proposed levy, sitting right in the middle of where those comparables are.
What are we using to compare? Is it population? Is it budget?
So we're not taking public comment quite yet. Let's get through the materials and we'll open up for public comment.
So that concludes my presentation. It's a summary of what was in the packet. If you have any questions on what I went over or any details that you have in the packet, I'm happy to answer any of those, or you can ask any questions of city staff, and we'll go from there.
Very good. Thank you, Kevin. Should we start with why? Is that what the question is?
Why compare yourself to the basic population, why?
Oh, why is it the benchmark group?
Yeah.
So Councilmember Erickson is asking me to expand on why the benchmark cities are selected. So a couple of things. We have historically benchmarked ourselves against those communities. Kevin, do you mind flipping back to that benchmark slide? Against those communities so that we have a consistent benchmark list that we're always going back to, so that we're not at risk of cherry picking. We like these communities for this particular metric, but other communities for another metric. So whenever we're doing a benchmark, this is the list that you will always see, unless we were to decide to change that group. And so it provides us some consistency. It also provides us both communities that are of a similar size to Forest Lake, sort of, but then also with near proximity, which is why, for example, we've got Wyoming on the list. Wyoming is a much smaller community than ours, as you can see, based off of their levy, and their population is much smaller, but there is a proximity, and so we like to include them in the list. Otherwise, they are communities generally of similar complexity to Forest Lake, similar structure to Forest Lake, size, and this is a list we review periodically to decide, is this what we want to continue to benchmark? Does it continue to make sense? I think this list has been fairly consistent for the last 3, 4, 5 years at least.
Yes.
And again, the goal is that we're always comparing against the same group so that we're not at risk of cherry picking. We do have a very full room tonight. A couple of things before we open up open forum. Some of you may have a lot of questions. And unfortunately, we're not going to be able to have dialogue back and forth to get specific questions answered. So you can ask your questions. We're just not going to be able to respond to get you all back those answers this evening. However, there's a couple of things that we would point you to. One is there's information on our website related to the budget as it's proposed, and also the supporting materials that have gone into the budget. You saw in the presentation some references to our capital improvement plan, for example. You saw a reference to our 10-year plan. All of those are kind of foundational planning documents that are incorporated into the presentation tonight and are also available on our website. We can certainly kind of list some questions and get that information back out in future meetings. We're just not going to be able to both respond to all questions tonight, but then also have the workshop meeting that we need to have. That said, we do want to hear your feedback, and so just if you're asking questions and if it seems like we're not responding, that is why that's just not the format we're able to do tonight. We do have additional workshops on this topic, as you saw on the calendar, in September before we affirm and certify our preliminary levy. And then throughout the fourth quarter, we typically have a couple of budget nights as well where we're talking about this topic as we continue to refine. And then in December, we have our formal Truth in Taxation Night. That is an opportunity for you to also give feedback to us, and then that all rolls into when we would adopt the final budget in December. So we are at the very front end of the conversation. Council has had some points of feedback on capital improvement plan and some major projects, but how all of this gets packaged together, we're at the very front end. And so if you leave here tonight feeling like you didn't get your question answered, it's okay. There is lots of time to get those questions out there, get those to either staff or us individually as council members. We have time to respond to that isn't necessarily in this evening.
Sarah, I would just add to that, if folks feel like they're not getting their questions answered, to reach out to Kevin or I. directly after the meeting or tomorrow or whatnot. We'd be happy to have a more in-depth conversation with anyone.
That said, with that opening, let's open up open forum, and if anybody has comments they would like to make an open forum, I invite you to.
We got your sheet there too.
Oh, and I've got an entire list. I pointed, go ahead, have a seat and we'll.
I'm Jamie Deichman. I live at 56 7th Street Northwest. I did look at the packet online, and I think most of it looks pretty reasonable. Cost of living increases, it all made a lot of sense to me. Obviously, we're all worried about our taxes going up.
Understand.
Could you possibly, if not tonight, then in the next workshop, just briefly expand on that? I think it was $500,000 increase for park dedication. And if we get some more details on not the new position for the economic development second in command that's going to be working the airport, but what we're trying to free up our current economic developer to do. Park dedication especially, though, that's a huge increase. Is there a off the top of your head kind of explanation on that?
So let's go through the list. I did note your question, and that will be a good topic of conversation, and we can give some more perspective as to why the percentage of increase, and then also just a little bit of history about park funding and how we've gotten to that number.
Am I reading it right that park dedication is not the same as park maintenance? Parks and recreation maintenance is not the same item. It's not the same item. It's a different place.
Correct, and I might be miscalling, somebody correct me if I'm
Step back.
calling
Park
it wrong.
improvement is what you want to say.
And what was your name again?
Jamie Deichman.
Jamie, yes, thank you for being here. Now we'll go from the list. Rick Menk. Would you like to speak this evening?
Can I just ask a question from here?
If you can speak loudly.
How does our city stand as far as being business friendly compared to other cities around here?
You can try to work that into this conversation this evening or in future conversations as well. Any other comments for us?
Question?
Matt? Let's go through the list and we'll pick you up at the end if your question hasn't already been answered or asked. Matt Lindholm?
I'm Matt Lindholm, as you heard, and I live on 20740 Glenbrook Avenue North. I'll be quick because I know there's a big list of folks. First of all, thank you all for having us here. It's an honor to actually come and talk to all of you. So my name is Matt. As I mentioned, I've lived here for 24 years. I just urge all of you when you're going through this process to think about the current financial impact let me back up. I urge you to please carefully think about the impact that a property tax increase would have on citizens, especially considering that over the last 4 years, we've experienced the worst inflation rates since the 81-82 recession. Please consider what Bureau of Labor Statistics confirmed that over the last 5 years, the majority of these years, people are experiencing cost of living increase that exceed their wage increases. Please consider that many of us don't get cost of living increases like mentioned in the budget and which is generally received by government and union employees. I urge you and city staff to research more creative ideas to raise rather than raising taxes. You can expect a list from me in the next 2 weeks with some creative ideas. You can also expect to see me and many other people in the upcoming meetings who share my sentiment about opposition to any increase in taxes. Thank you all for your time, and thank you for all that you do.
Thank you. Jill Bickford?
I also had questions about the park development. And I'm still a little gray on the contingency. Is that something new that was added to the budget? Because there was zero on the budget that was not shown on prior years. And then in looking at the 10-year plan, it looks like it's going up to 500,000 in subsequent years. Okay. that just seems like a pretty big slush fund. Do you have guidelines on how you can spend it, how you can tap into it? And if that, it sounded to me like it was put in there due to timing of when you receive revenues and when the expenses occur, but then it becomes baked in the budget. And then how is that spent? Because ultimately you get the money, but it's a timing of when it's available to spend. And it just seems like it's getting gobbled up in the budget.
We can address that.
Okay.
Is it Mick Donovan?
I have no questions.
Very good. Glad you're here. Terry Rauschendorfer,
Yeah,
welcome.
I didn't necessarily come here with specific questions, but the presentation kind of brought up a few things. First of all, in the comparable cities, definitely list how you came up with those cities. Because otherwise, for all of us sitting there, it looks like cherry picking. You know, so, yeah, you got the levy, you got the proposed levy, but why those cities? And then, I had the same thing as what was mentioned before in park dedication, $500,000 for what? Okay. And then the same thing with contingency, $250,000. What are you gonna do with it? Is it to be treated like a line of credit that a person can get at the bank or whatever, where you use it, but then you put it back again, you know, when the funds come in? Is it just a timing deal? You know, if you're taking that now, when does it come back out?
Thank you. Gloria Lyford. You good? Okay. Greg Lyford?
I just have one. Everybody's done a really good job of explaining their needs and wants. One talked previously about inflation as it is, you know, relevant to tax increases. It was a very good comment. And just to add one comment to that is, and years ago, a long time ago, they used to give a requirement that tax increases in the city and so forth had to be tied to inflation. Now that was written off many years ago. Wouldn't that be wonderful? Because then you wouldn't have to worry about not fixing your car next week because that tax increase outdid the amount of money that you got from your own boss who loves to give you large raises. Just a quick comment. And I know that can't happen, but it's something to think about.
Okay. Is it Krista Stemfer?
Yeah. Everyone's done a great job. Just something that stood out for me was there's $33,000 in increased legal expenses, and that things have just come up, and I'm just wondering what all that is.
Increased legal expense, are you referring to this year?
Yeah, well, whatever was up there.
Okay. Okay. Mary Mackey?
I've never been to one of these before, and so I'm just starting at a late age. And I looked at what was being spent on the voting for 2025. Is that because it's not a voting year? The election year. I mean, okay. And are we well, what my concern is are we spending money there? My goodness, I'd rather have money spent at protecting our vote than whatever this park thing is. I'm not going to no park. I mean, yeah. But we need to have a protected vote in this city because I don't think anybody feels comfortable with what we saw the last time and what we don't want to see it again. And we saw it with our own eyes. So that's my 2 cents.
Thank you. Eugene Hurstel.
Eugene Hurstel, 10234 204th Street North. I've been kind of going over budgets since 2000, showed up a lot of budget meetings and stuff. I I'd just like to maybe make some comments, as I see that a start of 13.9%. I can remember all the budgets always starting high, so they think they give you a really good deal when you go below. So, and I can remember when we would get it under, 10% or whatever. And now, last year's budget, I think, was around 13.9, is that correct? It started out at 22, but did we get a deal? Yes, inflation is up. This year, quote unquote, it's 4%, but I just want to say that we need some help as taxpayers and people that are in the community. I'm on a fixed budget, but I have always tried to speak for people that are on Social Security and the people that want to stay in their homes, and they don't get a big raise. I'm on a fixed income, I get a 1% raise next year on TRA. I'd like to talk to you about that. But anyway, so somebody's got to care for us. And I'm hoping that you would really take that into consideration. A lot of times the people, they would like to live their own lives, they'd like to be alone and not have to worry about the government getting into their lives and stuff. And so they have their work, they have their social life and everything. Sometimes they won't come and speak up. And then you hear it afterwards. But it's out there. But I wish more people would speak to that. As far as this Forest Lake being rated among these, I guess Wyoming last year, I realized that they don't have the big budget we had, but they didn't go over 10% last year. Scandia didn't go over 10%, and I don't think Columbus did either. So somehow those city councils found ways to keep the budget, at a level. Some of the cuts I think we could make would be EDA on that one. Community officer, maybe just hire one, and then eliminate the training captain at this point to try to get it down. I can remember when we cut $85,000 in the 2000 budget. And of course, that was many years ago when, we didn't have a lot of, it was less of a budget. But it did help the taxpayers, so we didn't get a raise. There was another time where we had a council that cut $625,000. And so that helped the taxpayers. There is ways to do it. If there's a will, there's a way. And I appreciate you helping us and trying to find out where we can do some of that cuts. Thank you.
Thank you. The last name. It's Margaret for sure. Is there a Margaret? Is there a Margaret here? All right, Ethan Stemper.
All right.
All right. Dean Knudsen.
Dean Knudsen, 7931 North Shore Trail. Just want a clarification on a comment that was made on the presentation where I believe, if I heard it correct, that you folks are green lighted for 14-point-some% increase on the 10-year plan, and it appears to me that if you come in under the 14, you thought everything was good. I don't know where that percentage came up from, if it's in the 10-year plan. If it is, what are we looking at over the next 10 years as far as a proposed increase that you feel is good or accepted?
Thank you. Brad Zernicki?
I think as far as that list goes, what I'd like to see is a little bit more as far as metrics, population, give us the population size. We're being told, well, these are the, trying to avoid the idea of cherry-picked communities that we're having here to compare. I was curious about the training, and I didn't know I was gonna be called, so I didn't write anything down. I was just kind of here to listen, but
I
I
think some of you
figured
got
why
this
not
as a
come here?
sign-in sheet, which is okay.
The training, the fire department training,
Training
is that
captain?
coming from, is that being hired from within? Or is that gonna be hired from without, or from outside,
To be determined.
in addition to the existing fire department, or is that,
New position, new position.
so,
We'll circle back and talk
Okay.
more about what that position.
it seems like if we were able to get away without it, couldn't we just move someone into that position? They're fighting fires, just because they have a different,
We have one full-time fire employee, and that's it, with paid on-call fire. So this would provide a backup or a second in command. And we'll talk more about what's included in that training captain
Sure.
position.
that was my
Very.
number one concern for everybody, just bring a little more clarity.
Fair, thank you. Victoria, is your next?
No, I don't.
Okay.
I don't have any questions. What's your Lucy?
Don or Diane Smith?
Thanks for this forum.
Yeah.
This really made my day to know this happens. I was surprised to hear how much it costs to seek for a city administrator.
Oh, the recruiting charge?
Yeah, what you are going to be paying a company, and I don't know if that passed yet, or maybe if you've already voted on that, and it has. $29,000 is a lot to pay a company to seek for a position.
Oh my gosh,
I know that city administrator is an incredibly important job, so that is not to negate the importance of that. But when I heard $29,000 or $19,000 that we would pay if we, or you found them, I just know there are so many ways to skin that cat. We have a lot of intelligent people in this room. I myself, I would offer my services with anyone else who would be willing to do any interviews, to do any footwork, whatever it takes, because we're all invested, that's why we're here. I just know that the last time that this happened, it was a big failure. When, as far as finding a company to find somebody, and then they were fired. So only you know who you really want to work with and who you can work with really, really well. You can hire a company, but the company doesn't know what you really are looking for our city. But we all voted you in because we want, you want what we want. Anyway, so I'm just throwing it out there. Maybe I reach out to the community because we are invested here. We know it, and I'm a pretty good read of character. Anyway, throwing it out there.
Thank you. Jack and Kimberly Kohler, either one?
We're good.
You're good? Good. Walter and Katina, is it Womack?
Yes, Womack. This is my first time coming to one of these meetings, and I wanted to see exactly how this operates and where the funding goes to, because I've been living in Forest. I've only been here like a little over 2 years. And every year I've been here, my property tax rate went up. It just went up. I just paid an additional $500 this year for increase in property tax. I paid $4 something last year, so I'm almost at $1,000. So I'm like, if I keep getting taxed $500 a year, 10 years, I'll be up $5,000. I just want to see how this works and how this process operates, where this money goes to, and why my taxes are going up.
Thank you. Okay, is there anybody else that would, that's the end of the sign up sheet. Is there anybody else that would like to speak? And, Karen Moorhead?
You tried to let me out.
Not intentionally.
I'm Karen Moorhead, 943 Southeast 12th Avenue, Virginia. I've been on the park board for years and years and years. I myself questioned the $50,000 for the parks. Well, yeah, that's right. The numbers become just what it is. And that's my point. My point is there's numbers, there's lots of numbers there. We're expected to look at them all, and we all appreciate the work that goes into them. But I'm looking at what happens after the money goes in. The $500,000 for parks. And Mills Park has sat there for 3 years. So when people raise their taxes, if they saw better parks, more parks, happy people at parks, they might think that was a good investment. But because of the inactivity given to the parks, Rotary, I don't know if it's official or unofficially, but they're withdrawing the $12,000 that they gave to that because we aren't a bank in Rotary and we can't keep that $12,000 sitting out there when we could help people. So if we don't see any action in the city, we have to take that money back and use it so we can help the folks. I'm gonna be watching the election, how many people really listen and get out in the community and say, what have you seen? Have the roads been better? Are the parks much better? You know, what are you saying? And I'm gonna be listening to the answer of the people that are running, because I myself would be willing to pay a little bit more, because I know prices go up, and I'm on that fixed income that Eugene's messing up to think about. But I wanna see results. And so when I see things being like the park, and you know how much I care about the parks, I wanna see something done, not just ask for more money. Thank you. Thank you.
Eric.
So, for a number of years, Eric Langlis, 9610 23rd Street, North Forest Lake. So for a number of years, I have posted polls on different threads online. And the most popular Forest Lake social media group, it happens to be on Facebook, or at least the one that I know of, over 10,000 people. And I put a poll up. I was trying to be as fair as I could, and I asked, and I gave 4 options for people to ask if this tax increase is correct. And I also put a link to the city's information so they had full access to it. And I tried to even answer as many questions as I could for people that threw things out there. And the results are, and I just looked at it, undecided, 8 people voted for that, which was 1%. Just the right amount was also 8 people, 1%. Not enough was 18 at 3%. And 537 people in our community said it's too much, 94%. I have never put a poll out on there that I think exceeded over 80% in any one category. It is overwhelming evidence that our community is not prepared for this type of increase, whether it's from, and I know it's not just you guys that land on our property taxes, it's the county, which I think is going up 7 or 8% they're talking about. I don't know what the school district is, but since I was on the board 20 years ago, they've maximized it every year to my knowledge, and they probably will every year for the rest of my lifetime. So we can anticipate a hike there. And then we have the Met Council, we have mosquito control, we have the watershed boards, which there's 2 of them in Forest Lake. They're
control this year.
we do, but mosquito control is about 0.2% of our property taxes. It's a very small amount. It's the cities, the school, and the county. And I think we really need to look at the budget. And I know last year I spoke and I brought some ideas forward, and I know that some of those were implemented in the budget. I look forward to working with you on reducing this budget. I don't think our community can go over about 5% this year. That's about where I would try to put your focus.
Is there anybody else that would like to speak this evening? Go ahead.
It's my first time here, so this is more of a learning experience too. But I really like the numbers about showing the year over year. It's an educational thing for me. But I know me and a lot of my neighbors have been asking too, is there a way for us to get access, a more granular access to past budgets so we can come to these types of meetings, not only just discussing the increases, but also looking at the budget as a whole and being educated and coming with comments and saying, hey, this might be an area where we don't need to spend, or maybe areas we'd like to see more spending in. So that's my first one. I just don't know where to find that, and so if we can get that, that'd be awesome. And my second one, I know there's a small comment at the beginning about what we're doing to encourage businesses, but I'd be really curious in this type of presentation as well to see what your guys' plan is to offset tax increases by economic growth in the city as well. And are there initiatives happening or projections that you would see for the future too, and say, okay, we invest this much now into parks, but it's good to actually not only drive local attractions, but it's good to drive people from out of town to come in and bring business to Forest Lake as well. I can't help but think I went with my family and my in-laws who are in town right now. We went over to Stillwater this last weekend, and it was on Saturday, and you couldn't find a parking spot anywhere in the entire city because they had so many people walking around, going to restaurants. You spend way too much money at a restaurant to get some food. And my kids bought random knickknacks at parlors that I didn't even know would even have business at in the age of Amazon. So I'm just wondering, I'd love to get more information. What are our initiatives to try to drive that and try to get that type of community going at work, again, with the mentality of saying to offset our costs as a community and increase, maybe one little bit a day where we don't have to have a tax increase and we're actually looking at, a surplus as well.
Anybody else that would like to speak?
Could I ask a question? I had mentioned something about the parks, and what they're looking for is $500,000 for the parks. And what was the grant, 12? What did you say the grant?
Rotary gave 12,000.
12,000?
Of course, it's.
Well, is that dependent on the 500,000?
No, I
And that's the point. I mean, 500,000 to spend $12,000. I mean, it could be yeah.
I mean, $12,000 is a donation made by the Forest Lake Rotary to the Bells Park project. And it's been sitting there for 3 years, maybe a little bit more than that. And so they had to withdraw their money because there are other things we have to do as Forest Lake Rotary. And I don't mean to pick up them.
I see.
So that part of the donation isn't going to be there because of inactivity from the board or the city council.
Okay, when I was wondering.
I'm gonna ask that comments be directed to the council. If you'd like to have a conversation, you're welcome to do so in the hallway.
I was curious how that was dependent on each other.
Understood.
Thank you.
Anybody else with questions, comments before we?
Just a comment when you were talking about the businesses. It seems like most of the businesses here, I'm calculating, 80 Street, are more service oriented. Can we get some manufacturing or something else that's going to be some well-paying jobs that's going to help that tax growth as well? So, something to bring in more jobs that are just going to be sort of service.
Understood. And you should take a look at our EDA agendas as well. That is what that body exists for. There's been a lot of great questions asked, and a lot of kind of peppered throughout the questions and the themes. There's a lot of requests for additional information. I'd circle back to a couple of my comments on some information that's available online that are some foundational documents that would help you to kind of understand why what's being proposed is being proposed. I would point to in particular our 10-year plan. We have a 10-year financial plan. It was in our last workshop. We just received an updated presentation that had some updated revenue modeling that was layered on top of our expense modeling that was already done, that kind of projects out a 10-year budget for the city. And that is available online. Embedded in that 10-year plan are some very specific project plans that would kind of provide the basis for when you're seeing our capital improvement fund and when you're seeing our park fund, and you're seeing these big blocks of money each year, you're wondering what goes into those. That is, those projects are also outlined in those respective capital improvement plans or the park plan that kind of roll up into the 10-year plan that really identify large projects that are planned over the next 10 years. There's a street project list, there is a park project list, there's a city infrastructure list that, again, all kind of roll into this 10-year plan. And that's really where you get a lot of the meat of some of the projects that are anticipated. There's a lot of questions, just foundational questions about park funding. And so I think if we could take a look at, do we have the 10-year, do we have something that can provide kind of why, would help answer why 500,000 this year for parks in particular?
We have a couple of things in tonight's packet, Mayor, that we could direct folks to. Page 89 of tonight's packet lists all the parks that would be improved in the Park Improvement Fund. The couple pages before that, debt issuance for parks. This is more park improvements on page 87. If you want to find even more detail on each of those because it lists the park names, you can go back to our June 17th agenda packet that's on our website, and each project will have its own page describing what will be done and where those costs are.
That June 17th packet that Christina mentioned is about 200 pages long, and it goes through each project, exactly what Christina said. There's about a page for each project that kind of lists high-level project anticipated cost, what's the benefit for that project, and then the estimated timing. And again, there's one project for each, or one page for each of those projects that kind of gives some better context. It is the roll-up of all of those and then spread out over 10 years, which is what generates, okay, this is how we need to break up those costs by year in order to fund those projects that are, many times, multiple year projects are planned many years in advance. So foundationally, I would just point you to those documents that are available that support a lot of the detail that you saw here tonight.
Could you clarify where on the website that might be, please?
It's under the agendas for City Council.
And the June, is it the June 17th?
June 17th.
Meeting in particular has that level of detail.
Yes.
We are going to transition into a working session of council. Please understand, we love that you are here. You are welcome to be here to hear this conversation. But this is also our only opportunity to really roll up our sleeves and have that kitchen table conversation on what are we going to do. I think many times in the public, you think that these conversations happen offline. They do not. And actually, we are not allowed outside of, two of us to have this conversation without it being a public meeting. And so this is really our opportunity to really ask questions of staff, to challenge each other, to just, again, this is us literally sitting at the kitchen table talking about what is it that we're going to do. You're welcome to be here, but if it feels like this is kind of an offline conversation, like I can't believe they're actually doing it in the meeting, this is how it works. Again, you're here on a workshop night, is a working session, and I need you to allow us the space to do some of that work. Now, I will provide an opportunity at the end for some additional questions of limited time. If we have time, it's already 7:30 this evening. This is meeting one of several meetings. Again, I'm trying to balance us having space to do some work and also provide you with the information that you want. We love that you're here. And if we could move into that workshop time.
Mayor, I have to correct what I said. It was a discussion item, but it was at the June 26th regular meeting that we had the capital improvement. So sorry about that. June 24th, at the end of that packet is where we started our discussions about the 10-year capital improvement plan.
There's 2 items in the June 24th.
What's that?
There's 2 items in the June 24th. One of those or something.
We have a special meeting. There should be a regular meeting that day. Yeah, we had a special meeting, so go to the regular meeting at 7 o'clock that day.
Thank you.
Just, all of us level set on. Review
That's
where
the
we
June
are.
17th.
Yeah, sorry, it was the wrong one. It's the June 24th.
I'll start with you.
Perfect.
Thank you so much.
All right, with that, also I have jotted, and I will try to pepper into our working session here, a lot of the questions specifically that you have asked. So again, you're welcome to stay, but we are going to bring the conversation back to council.
Well, I didn't go in the hall to talk, folks.
I do need to ask that the conversation in the room stops though. I am deaf in one ear and I won't hear if there is a murmur in the room. So if you'd like to have a conversation, welcome you to kind of step out into the hallway to do that, and then you're welcome to certainly come back in. Give a moment just for folks to get settled. Okay, council, I think we're gonna get started. I think the first topic to maybe kind of circle on is parks. And Kevin's got some materials here to guide.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you for speaking. You're speaking right out of my heart. Thank you.
All right, Mayor and City Council, this is a kickoff, to kind of bring us back and kick off the conversation. A lot of questions have been brought up about the tax levy of $600,000 in the park improvement fund. Since that was the main issue topic, in 2024 there was $100,000 in the property tax levy dedicated to park improvement. With the 10-year plan that was approved in December of 2023, it was proposed to go up to $500,000. It is proposed in 2025 now at $600,000 because if council recalls, we did commit $100,000 to the Veterans Park Memorial for city funding related to that park improvement, which was not planned for in that 10-year capital plan. That is why it is now at $600,000. Where the city came up with that $500,000 was when we looked at all the costs that are not only for future park costs, but just really deferred maintenance of park equipment and trying to balance the cost of with the property tax levy, but also then if we want to maintain just our current parks, not necessarily adding new parks, there are some new projects in there that are new. But just to even maintain what our current park system and the equipment and trails that go along with that, that's where the staff was recommending that $500,000 level for that park improvement fund so we have funds available to pay for that new park equipment or maintain those trails as they come due. So that is where that dollar amount has come from. This is a great council to kind of back to that amount, and if there's any questions from there, I'll turn it over to Mayor and City Council.
Maybe if I could just a little bit of background information for those that are still in the room on this particular topic. This is a challenging topic because we're talking about property tax dollars going to park maintenance and park improvements. And historically, Forest Lake has not used general fund property tax dollars in that manner. And so when you hear these numbers and you see, oh my gosh, we're going from $100,000 to $500,000, it's like, what is going on? It is us trying to have a well-maintained, fully maintained park system on a decades of where that just hasn't happened. Historically, our parks have been funded only by park dedication funds that are paid by developers when developments happen. That goes into a park dedication fund that then is used. What is challenging is that's great to build new parks, but it doesn't do anything once those parks are in place and now need to be maintained, which is how we've ended up in this spot where we don't have, up until very recently, have not had a plan for that equipment maintenance. So 20 years, 30 years as a piece of playground equipment wears out and needs to be replaced, we have not had planned funding to do that. Now that is a known challenge. We've been struggling for many years. The 10-year plan would estimate that we need about this level of funding every year to keep up. The challenge for council is going from zero to that number, and when is the right time and in what increments to do that. We've had this conversation for at least the last 2 years on council as that number has been developed, and we've started to recognize that our current source of funding is inadequate for all of that maintenance. Parks are like the number one thing that we hear that the community wants. When we hear, what is it that you want more of? You want more trails, you want more recreation, you want more parks, you want great spaces to be enjoyed. And this is perhaps our biggest disconnect right now. And so is $500,000 this year the right number? You're gonna hear us and you're gonna hear a bunch of angst and we're not quite sure, but the number needs to be north of zero. And so we've made some small pieces. We've gotten up to $100,000 a year built in, as we just need to have this routine maintenance like you would plan for a roof on your house or windows or all of that routine maintenance. We need to build that from something north of zero, which is why you're seeing these steep recommendations year over year. It's again, us getting to a place where we have that dedicated funding space. And how fast do we get there is exactly what we're gonna wrestle with next here. So I just wanted to give that background of why is it that increase. The specific projects of what would be maintained and when are again back in that park plan, but it really is 20 to 30-year-old playground equipment that just has not been replaced. And the challenging part is there's, up until very recently, no plan to replace it. So again, that's part of the gap that we're trying to fill. Enough background, council, this topic, we've continued to wrestle with it. Thoughts?
Just on the initial conversation on the 500 and 600, I guess in my mind, I was thinking that 100 was coming out of the 5, not the additional 100 when the veterans came that looking for support. Christine's looking at me
I could probably go back and, I want to make sure I don't misspeak again. I'm surprised to hear that, Councilmember Roberts, that you thought that a new project would not require new funding, but maybe we missed conveying that to you.
I know that, but I guess, you know, it just.
I think maybe maybe what you're saying is when you approved that, you were thinking that you were kind of earmarking and that we would, yeah.
I mean, if
So are there other things you want to cut in order to fund that?
Well, if we're not 100% comfortable on the 500 or 600, that might be a start, as just to back that into that $500,000. But just a thought.
It is new money. Or what's new money is the Veterans Memorial is new money that wasn't anticipated last year.
So my 2 cents on this, I mean, this 13.39 is high, as we spoke before the meeting started. There's some things in here that are still reflecting higher numbers in even most recent discussions, like the park supervisor versus whatever role we had before. You know, so there's some things like that. I too question the contingency fund. That was, whoever said slush fund, that was the first word that came to my mind as well. I understand why it's in there, you know, from Eller's projections. But when I was going through the budget earlier, and just kind of some of the numbers, you know, there's a lot of the pages has the 23 activity, the 24 budget, and then activity through halfway through the year. And one of the things I noticed was missing was our interest earnings, Department 49, 9,200. Last year, in 2023, we earned $275,000 of interest. And I suspect if interest rates not even drop, we've got to be somewhere in that same neighborhood this year. And so while we budgeted $95,000, could that difference between reality and budget be incorporated to eliminate that contingency fund for 2025? This is one area that I'm not asking you to put you on the spot, I'm sharing my thoughts. Because that was a big one. Now, obviously interest rates are going to drop, and so we don't want to budget that level forever. That was a big one. And then as far as staffing, I mean, you know, going into last year's budget.
Can I interrupt before we get to that, just so I get clarification? When you're talking about that interest, are you suggesting that for 25, instead of the 95,000, we should put something like 275 on the revenue? Or what?
Not necessarily, because I think interest rates will drop, and that interest earnings will probably drop, so I don't want to over budget that.
Okay.
But I think that we planned on 95,000 according to the budget. We are probably receiving quite a bit north of that this year in earnings. And so could we say, okay, that extra revenue, which wasn't budgeted for, so it's somewhere in there somewhere, could that be used to offset that contingency fund, at least for 2025?
Yeah, and so, if you wanted to, I was just gonna say, so part of our other conversation earlier, and Kevin and I talked about it, another column that's in your budget documents is projected end of year 2024. And so we do think that your revenues will exceed expenses in 2024. We've had some vacant positions. I don't know what all leads to that, but there's some of that. It is early, and so the thought was that once we present to you third quarter financials in October, we would have a better sense of how that last quarter is going to go, and we could potentially be looking at taking that 250,000 contingency out of the budget for that reason. And I think we're saying the same thing, maybe just differently, right?
Yeah.
That was my question, is what is our projected fund balance, or where are we sitting with projected surplus to fund balance at the end of the year? Are we Are we
So-
below the 50% level? Are we anticipated to be below the 50% level, or?
I don't have that number right now where we're projected to be at, how that correlates to how that would correlate to where it falls in with the 2025 budget. But right now, we are projecting that our revenues will exceed expenditures for 2024. But to Christina's point, we're gonna have a much better idea come third quarter of where exactly we're gonna land in on that. And then taking that, if we project, for example, our fund balance is gonna go up 200,000 or whatever that number is, take that fund balance, take our expenditures for 2025, times that by 50%, and is that fund balance 50% or not? That's how that works. And this is a new budgeting strategy and target for the city. This has not been done in the city previously. When I looked at the budget and when I came here 2 years ago looking at that, that's one thing that's never been budgeted for, and it's just been, the fund balance is kind of just accumulated and it was over that 50%. And I believe when I got here, it's at about 58%. So now slowly over the past 2-3 years, budgets are going up, increases are going up. You're closer to having that balanced budget and actual results. So now that's coming down. So now you're at 50%. And if we keep going at this rate without addressing that fund balance policy, it could just slowly lead to being under that policy, which is a negative impact to the city, where rating agencies look at this, it's your policy to be at 50, if it goes below that, that's not where you want to be. So that's where this 250 contingency budget was put in there to help maintain that 50%, but it's something that if we get, the goal is to get a number in there and hopefully have that be a more level number going forward and ultimately lower and maintain this going forward year after year.
And we really discovered this with the new tool of the long-range financial management plan. And so like we talked at that meeting, this is a tool, each time Kevin is bringing this to you, we're having more and more updated information that can impact that, so.
I guess maybe, so I guess council, are we at least in like conceptual agreement that fund balance should be 50% and that we should use this tool to proactively manage that? I guess, do we have agreement on that, on that foundation? I would advocate quite strongly that we do, we are a growing community, so that our budgets are growing and that, that 50% level is going to continue to increase. And I just feel like we should build that into our growth. Without that conscientious building it into your growth, it becomes a thing that you don't ever want to fund. It's not fun. So if you just build it in, and then we don't have to make this decision of needing to address it. And
what's your question? Are we in agreement with the 50% policy?
I mean, are we in agreement that we should use this tool to proactively manage to that 50% level?
Which tool?
The financial management plan.
The financial management plan, which, this is us more, I guess, proactively managing to that 50% level.
Yeah, the only thing I didn't like about that tool, or maybe the presentation, was that if I could correct me if I'm wrong, but it didn't really incorporate any commercial growth. And so it really projects high tax rates going forward, to earlier comments of what are we doing to develop the commercial community to offset these taxes. If you look at that tool, it looks like we're doing nothing, which is just absolutely not the case. So that's my only pushback on that particular tool, is that it's a little short-sighted.
So you're saying it's a little conservative, and since it's on the conservative side, it might cause us to overfund fund balance or be more aggressive than we would need to?
I guess I didn't look at it that closely. I suppose it's a likely outcome, but all I remember is seeing that tax rate going from 37 to 41 up to north of 50, which I don't think anybody's got an appetite for. And then we're Columbus.
So is there some, sorry, because Councilmember Eric said you brought this up a couple times, so I want to make sure I'm not ignoring you. All right, is there a proposal for what we should be including from a commercial valuation and growth going forward that you'd like us to put in there? As we said last time, we didn't, because quite frankly, commercial development is just so unpredictable. That doesn't mean though, again, you're looking at this every year, multiple times a year like we are now.
So
Understand the further away we are, the less likely it's gonna be that way, right? And you can make decisions, you, the council in place, every year can make decisions to change that.
Well, I think we gotta be careful with terms too, because when I thought commercial, I thought manufacturing. but commercial really means multifamily. And so it means commercial means a lot of things. Our comprehensive plan calls for a certain density level, which is going to require multifamily. So even if we figured out some sort of a growth pattern around that, well, we're going to have to do that anyway to be compliant. It would make some sense.
Is council in agreement that we should look at adding in multifamily growth based upon our comp plan projections into the FMP?
I think it's, yeah.
Maybe a conservative element, take say the goose egg is.
And with that same, there's a little bit of a style difference here. I think, I look at that 10-year plan as wanting it to be as accurate as possible with a pretty strong lead towards conservatism. I'd rather be sending not a tough message, but this is what this number might be, and help to set expectations. And then if things go according to plan or even better than planned, then great, then things can come down a little bit. But I'm looking at that as from the pure financial planning perspective. Councilmember Erickson, you bring to it, or what you speak of is more of also kind of a communication document to the community. And I think that's maybe where we need to be careful of setting the expectation on it. This is really how we're developing. Please know that we will take some action so that that isn't our final result. But that also is a prospective statement, and it's, kind of challenging to say. So I get nervous on trying to marketing or create a financial model that maybe looks more palatable. I'd rather be conservative and be surprised, but there's some style differences there.
I just think you leave a lot of growth out.
Yeah.
I mean, because a lot of that additional expense would be but for growth over here.
You are right. You're right. And
For what it's worth, I think planning for multifamily is a reasonable middle ground. I've done that in my previous community, and there's also, we can talk about how, I forget the exact conversion of how many apartment units equal a house and that kind of stuff, but it could be flexible enough that it's really about housing growth, including multifamily, so we could come up with something, sure. Probably not till next year. I don't know if we'll get it in this budget cycle. We'll have to revisit that with Bruno, but.
So can I ask a bigger, broader question on this fund balance policy? When you say it's a policy, that's our policy. How long has that been in place, as you know, and is 50 about what most communities do?
Yeah.
Or is there some state statute that says we have to, or?
Yeah, so the policy's been in place at least since 2019, Kevin, maybe longer. The state auditor recommends that cities have a fund balance between 35 and 50%. A lot of communities will go to that 50% because, as the mayor said, you only get paid, again, 83% of your revenues twice a year, 2 point something. Because you get half of it in July, half of it in December, a tiny little bit of catch up in January. So I think it is pretty common to be at 50% fund balance, yes.
And this to go off of that, this is by no means a slush fund. It's been said by some members of the community, and what this is. It's not, this purpose is exactly what it says is we need to cover 50% of our general fund expenditures until we get that payment in late June or early July is when we get that payment from the county. So it's by no means stockpiling funds away for future use. It's to support those general operations of the city to that point. That's where the league says a minimum of 35%. From my experience in seeing other communities, when you go down to that amount, you really sometimes end up borrowing from other funds to help support your general fund operations, possibly for a couple months. So it's a point of topic where we can discuss that policy, and if we want to stay at that 50%, but most communities are pretty much 45 to 50%.
And I would reiterate another point that Kevin made, because I think it's important, is that it's impactful to our bond rating. So again, as we're looking for bonding for more for roads, maybe parks, some other things, public works facility, whatnot, that factors into what our bond rating is, which leads to lower interest rates and saves the city money overall too. So from a financial policy, it's good practice.
This contingency fund, let's just assume something for a second, just for pure math. If that was totally eliminated, what would that do to the levy?
About 2%.
See, that's what I'm driving at. See, we're looking at, many folks are looking at this total number without realizing that, yeah, we could eliminate this thing, but it isn't gonna really, you know.
2%.
2 percentage points, so from 13 down to 11. So it's roughly about every $110,000 that you cut is 1 percentage point less.
But what I'm getting at is that it doesn't affect the taxes to a great degree.
Oh, we haven't, we could look at that, I know the worksheet came up from.
But I don't think, I'm not suggesting we eliminate it.
Yeah.
I just wanted everybody to know what would happen to the math. It's simple as that. I agree that we need to have that 50% reserve. That's always been normal. I don't think we want to get into a situation where we don't have that, so.
I'm sorry I interrupted you. So you're not on your list.
Sure.
So just for reference, since we're talking about, I just did the math, it's actually about 1.6% if you took $250,000 out
Yes, that's the issue.
for the overall levy.
Well, I remember going into last year's budget, there was like 3 big asks. There was, let's start funding roads, which had never been done well before. Let's try to get our staff right, which had been kind of not right for a while. And let's fund parks. And we kind of all agreed that we couldn't do all 3. And we chose roads last year, which was a big driver. That, along with inflation, was a big driver of why last year's tax increase was what it was. We took on something new that had never been done before. So now we still have staff and parks left. And now we're throwing in this contingency fund. If we can avoid doing that this year because our revenues are greater than our expenses, it might be a year to pass on that, in my opinion. Revisit it next year if we need to. I mean, I understand why it's in there, and I think it makes sense. We 100% agree with the 50% fund balance, where it costs us a lot more if we go below that, but now might not be the right year. I would love for us to get our staffing right. We've been promising CSOs to Chief Peterson for years, and I think it's actually a zero net cost when you start looking at the efficiency of the police department by having it. So I'd love to see that. And training camp, we knew we wanted to include that in this initial levy with the hope and prayer that sometime in the next 5 weeks we hear that we've got a grant that's going to cover the cost for the next 3 years. And if that doesn't, then we've got to revisit it. But our police department is one of the most well-run, our fire department, the most well-run, efficient systems in, not only Forest Lake, but the area. I mean, we don't get that thing right, it's going to cost us millions of dollars. So my goal would be to, let's get a number 2 in the fire department, police station. Also.
Since we're on positions, a little bit of a change, I don't know, this new position, this EDA/airport manager, like is that based on not getting much response on the
No, so
that we sent out?
We presented this to you back in April, I think, with the staffing plan, so it's not at all related to the contracted airport manager. And the EDA supervisor, I think they called it, it might have had a slightly different name last year. It's essentially that same position, but with the departure of your previous assistant administrator, we've had this issue of where does the airport fall? And so when we talked about this in April, we put it with this planning manager from whether it's an economic development kind of role that you see for the airport, or it's just code enforcement out there. Otherwise, it's, the 10 hours a week that, on average, that Dan used to spend just responding to questions about leases and lots and preparing for the commission and the grants and all of that kind of stuff. Friday is the due date for the RFP responses to the airport manager that we had council approved last month sometime. These two things are not mutually exclusive. These two things are mutually exclusive. One would not replace the other. The contracted airport manager, for lack of a better term, would be much more knowledgeable in airport stuff, help us write our minimum use standards, update our leases, get some guidelines in place that we need. I would hope that they would be with the city no more than 2 years. But your planning manager, who would be the staff person to the airport commission and answering those general airport questions that come in, would be a permanent position. Unless we want to give it to Dave.
So this was presented before the idea of bringing in a specific airport manager doing RFP. So is this, if we land on someone that, find someone that isn't gonna blow the budget, and find a company that managed, then can we push this position off? Would you think?
No, for two reasons. So again, you're gonna be hiring a contractor, you need a staff person to manage that contract. As much as we love folks like, Ryan and Amanda, they don't operate on their own, somebody's gotta manage them, right? You'll also need somebody then, again, to like answer those, this person might answer those day-to-day questions, but they would need to sign off on grants and those type of things that I've been doing. And so there's not that there wouldn't be any staff time involved. You could have a discussion about whether you think it's less than the 25%. But that probably means then shifting those funds to the general levy rather than having the airport fund pay for them.
So I don't, just based.
So this position is also needed to grow the community development department and help free up some time so that hopefully we can be more proactive or at least more responsive when businesses contact us, right? In my short time, I've noticed it's taking us months to get back to prospective businesses that want to come here. That's not how it works in the private business, right? I know I'm staring at you folks who know, right? But that's where I think there can be that advantage. This person would also help with code enforcement and establishing that process so that we can make sure that our staff that is here is continuing to do that. So that, again, it's only when it grows exponentially or that you might need to hire a code enforcement official, but this is another person to help with that. So it's not just because of the airport. We're trying to find a way to put the right mix of duties together, understanding that we can't afford to fund an individual full-time person for all of these different needs. So how do we balance that out?
So with attending the airport commission meeting last week or 2 weeks ago, the concern with that budget is, so that dollar amount is, when you have a contracted person, and now we're also going to take 25% of that to fund the position, it seemed like it was a little sketchy whether it could even just pay for a contracted person.
So I think what you're getting at, and correct me if I'm wrong, when we presented the budget to the airport commission, their 2025 budget will show them dipping into fund balance by about $50,000. And that does not account for any of the costs for this contracted position. They have about a $200,000 fund balance as of the end of this year. So it's sustainable for a couple of years, but again, that can't be the long-term solution. Either there's got to be some more revenues or general tax levies or finding a way to cut expenses at some point in time.
So would you see that, is there a path, going from what we have today and what the airport fund is supporting to then go to a contract position, but then also 25% for this staff role just feels like a lot. Would you see that this airport manager role, the contract position, is this a couple of years, and then after a couple of years, is there an opportunity? So they get minimum use guidelines in place, these things that are kind of on that punch list, and then they turn it over back to staff. And so is it possible that maybe it's a, 5%, 10%, something less than 25% for those, 2 years while we've got the contract? I appreciate you need somebody to manage that, but 25% seems kind of rich.
Or we just shifted it then from the airport fund to the general fund, it's not changing the levy.
Correct.
Yeah. I'm open to suggestions. I understand what you're saying, Mayor. My thought was though, and Councilmember Husnick, I think you said last at that meeting too, that we felt like Dan was spending about 10 hours a week on the airport stuff, give or take, up and down. There's a lot of things that weren't being done when Dan was spending his time on that, when Dan was spending those 10 hours, right? Because Dan had a whole bunch of other things. He had HR, he had EDA, he had technology, he had all these other things on his plate. And so I'm certainly, we'll take whatever direction council gives. I don't have a good answer, Mayor, about what that percentage is, because you're not trading like for like, right? And to me, this extra contracted person is to make up for what hasn't been done for years. So it's not like they're gonna be doing, they might, I shouldn't say that, like they might be answering some phone calls if there's a lease available, a lot available or something. I don't know how much time, Dan spent on that. It's usually a pretty, nope, we don't have any lots. You wanna be on the list, but, that's, again, open to whatever direction council wants to go with that. We're gonna have to kind of wait and see how it plays out. I mean, the other thing is I told the airport commission, and I know we've talked about this before, the city doesn't do a great job of allocating its staff to the programs that it works on, right? So Dave will still spend time at the airport even if he's not airport manager. The airport fund pays for zero of his time. So at a high level, in my mind, I'm trying to get on board with the programming that you've had in the past that it kind of balances out. So maybe, maybe not. I mean, that's obviously, again, some direction or things we can work towards at a future date.
So just on that, more on that position then, we've had more council planning commission meetings than we've had planning commission meetings. We've increased that staff to 3 people versus 1 person 2 years ago, as little as 2 years ago. Is it safe to say that bringing someone on to do more than then we would have this organic development, or we're actually gonna go out and be attending events like Dan used to in EDA on a regular basis, and then how does that fit into the bigger picture of, I think the long-term plan would be pulling the building out of fire and in the community, so how does that all work? And
Yep, so let me start with the first part of your question and then make sure I come back to the second one. So yes, we've had more planning commission meetings canceled than we've held this year. That doesn't mean we don't have the work to do. I don't have a good enough sense to know what's being done in place of somebody preparing for those packets. But one of the things that I've heard is needed is a redo of your zoning code, right? So this could be one of those higher level projects that a higher level position is able to take on and tackle and get done. So there's work that's not being done right now with our staffing. I think, yes, you're correct. We've tripled in recent years the number of FTEs in the community development department. I've gone back and looked at staffing for every department except for public works. I haven't pulled the data. And I am in support of all of these positions that are in your budget for next year. Because once you do that, you will have not only restored to your 2014 level of staffing, but accommodated for the growth that has occurred between 2014 and 2024 in all departments except for, again, public works and fire is its own, unique unicorn, right? So I think it's needed for that and the growth and the things that are going on in those programs. The idea of moving the building department into the community development department is not at all related to this position. We would have a community development director. Their 2 direct reports would be the planning manager and the building official. The building official then oversees the building inspectors and the fire permit tech. The planning manager oversees your zoning administrator, your administrative assistant right now, and in the future if you add a code enforcement officer. So they're in the same department because I think there can be some really good synergy for development if building and planning work closer together, but one doesn't replace the other, impact the other that way from a staffing perspective. Did I capture all of your questions?
And we're also looking at negotiations now this fall, I would think,
For union contracts, yep, we have AFSCME, MAPE, and local 49ers up this fall. Or end of this year.
those are all budget considerations for sure. And I know that there's some money in there, but we won't know the exact number of that either. Those contracts are signed.
True. I don't want to get too much of an open discussion, but I think we've budgeted for what we think it will be based upon the city's past practice and approach to union negotiations, is what I'll say. We can talk about more of that in a closed session or offline. Happy to do that. I just don't want to get into too many details here.
Last year, we were told that there was 6 to 7% fixed increases that we had no control over. When we just talked about wages, fuel, insurance. What is that number? Maybe we shared earlier. What is that number for next year? Do we have that?
I don't know if we have that.
You don't have that currently, but for payroll, it is organically at least 5%, if not closer to 6%, when you look at the cost of living increases and then the benefits that just go along with that, and remaining competitive in that realm. So just with no increases in staff or new positions, that would be the increase in wages there. Now that, I would say, looking at the budgets for, fuel and all, the electricity, we've seen those stabilize quite a bit, where some of it in the past couple of years has just been getting us to where we need to be, is what I'll say to that. And that's for going back to one of the slides where supplies and other charges where you're seeing a 1%, 2%, 3%. It's really minimal increases there, where some are shifting a little bit increase and down, where we're trying to more align with where that's at. So when we're looking at the increase in the general fund is our current employees are here and then there's open positions.
So we can get that number. I think that tells a story to the public when they're like, oh my gosh, it's gonna be 10% or 12%. But you're like, just like everyone else's expenses at home, those are increasing every year. And to be able to explain that to folks, I think it's a little easier to present a higher number or whatever number we land on. And that was useful last year.
This maybe piggybacks a little bit on your comments, Councilmember Roberts, but also I appreciate Christina's, involvement and guidance on which positions are needed to best do the work and when and where. And so I have some trust that the job description for the position that's being proposed for the EDA and planning is the right one. But just back to some of the feedback that we heard tonight about what are we doing to encourage, economic growth, what are we doing to make sure that we maintain, that we are business friendly, what are we doing to maintain our overall low tax base, those things really hinge on a really successful EDA role. And so we can do some arm wrestling over that position and title and what does that look like, but the investment of those dollars all really go towards that exact goal, which is economic development, recognizing that if we are going to grow as only a residential community, that's a very expensive growth model. We offset that when we have that economic growth. And so for us being proactive, us being out in the community, making sure that we are attractive for that business community, that's an investment in kind of, again, that balance of commercial development and residential development that helps to keep residential property taxes lower than if we are going to be a community that is more residentially focused. Back to the maybe not really loved benchmark communities, I would point to, for example, Farmington has very little commercial businesses. They are very much a bedroom community. About the same level of population, very similar structure of government, structure of level of services, and they consistently year over year have a higher tax rate and a higher levy. And I've always attributed that a lot to the difference between our commercial base and their commercial base, and us having that lower levy because we have that larger commercial base. So, from the feedback that we heard tonight on wanting to be, again, business friendly, keeping that tax base low, that investment in EDA, again, let's land on the right position and make sure we have the right person sitting in the right seat, but that's why we invest in all of those activities. And so I support the incremental adjustment, and then I'm happy to rely on Christina and staff as to how do they best position staff to deliver that product. But I think we have to keep kind of going back to what is the importance of it and why do we need to do it. Yes, we've had some canceled planning commission meetings, but we're also in a little bit of a development lull. And we know that we have that land available. When that engine starts cranking again and we start having those projects, we will be back to some of those don't say the R word recession, but like this little bit of a lull we've had from higher interest rates. That activity is going to come back, and so let's make sure we've got the right people to support that.
There's a couple of TIF districts that are getting up there too, isn't there?
Yeah, I believe one is scheduled to be done in 26 or 27. That's where it's scheduled at.
And there's a couple after that, right?
Yeah, there's a couple after that. I'd have to pull that to get you after. I think The one that's gonna be coming up the soonest is at 26, 27.
Those are all things that'll affect that budget.
Correct, yes.
Yeah, because that wasn't included, that added tax base that will give them those closeout when
Right.
Bruce presented that FFP.
I'm thinking about this overall question on the 10-year plan and impact of that commercial. If we were to build in, the model to include multifamily, is that something that we're able to do internally and something we could do before we see an updated 10-year plan? Or what does that look like to be able to make those changes?
I don't know that we can do it internally. I would probably go back to Bruce and change that where he just has the 1%, that we actually develop what is the average home value, and then we can plug in how many units. Again, I forget what it is, but there's some conversion you can make from multifamily to single family. That way we can just track it. I think then we can update it as we change the numbers a little better, rather than the percentage approach that he used, unless Kevin has some other thoughts, but that's what I would suggest.
No, I was gonna follow on the same lines until I received the spreadsheet from Bruce after he presented it with the plan that I will be updating it year after year as we approve this budget and update projections. That'll be a updated document as well, but just to dig into it and look at it to see how that would flow through to make sure it's flowing through correctly. I would probably rely on Bruce a little bit on the front end this year to see how we can incorporate that. And then once we understand how that works, then just being something out there.
All right, so I need to confirm and make sure we're walking away with good direction. We'll put something in the FMP for the financial management plan. We'll put together and do that calculation on what are the things we don't have control over that are going up. Where did we land on contingency or that? I know where Councilmember Erickson landed, but I'm curious from the rest of you, are you at a point right now where you want to see that removed when it comes back to you at the September 9th meeting? Or do you want to wait till later? What's the thought on that? That was the other topic we talked about.
I think we need to be able to look at it both ways, because as we just talked about, it's only about a 1.5% difference in the levy. We just had that comparison. Again, I'm looking at this,
So we could bring that back for the September 9th one where you have the impact if you take that out. But by the 23rd, you'll have to decide one way or another to.
the big thing is, I firmly believe that we need the 50%,
Yeah.
reserve. I really do. We don't want to get into that can of snakes, so.
I'd like to keep it in there as well.
Okay.
Do you want to keep it in there even if we're north of 50%?
I'm here to keep it in there for now, that we would want to look at it.
I think we get that down. I would say that we could maybe cut it down or eliminate it.
I mean, I'm not advocating that we go below 50%.
No, I wasn't implying that. I just wanted to make sure that this contingency may or may not be needed for that, that's all.
Right, and so what level of comfort, right? Because we could go and Kevin could start doing that projections tomorrow. Or again, we could wait until you've got 3/4 of the year done and do the projections, the 3/4 of expenses, so we have a better idea of what's coming.
I think you need a 50% fund balance, and since this is a new tool, I think we're being very conservative by not having to have this contingency fund.
You'd be very conservative by not having.
Well, I mean, we're being safe by not having, I don't think we're doing enough here to not have it. This is something new. This is a new program, correct? Is that how?
It's a new tool, it's not a new program. I think this has always been you just haven't talked about it, right? Because you didn't have the tool to actually draw it out to know. It wasn't part of your discussions. How about for the September 9th meeting, we'll get an update on where we're at, where we think fund balance is gonna be, and you can give us further direction if we should take it out, is that?
I think it's always challenging, 'cause it comes down to what is our level of conservatism that's built into the plan, and how comfortable are we with those projections? And I so much appreciate that, because we are light years ahead of where we were 5 years from a budget standpoint. We weren't budgeting 3 years into the future on many things, and certainly weren't actively managing fund balance on a projected level. And so I appreciate that this is the next layer of sophistication and want to encourage us to get there. I think seeing, it's been a while since we've seen fund balance, let's see where we are today. And then really kind of guide, how do we bake this into, it's kind of like, you know, first version of the 10-year plan didn't have parks, and now we've got 10-year plan plus parks. Okay, let's, you know, bake this in. It's taken us a couple budget cycles to make those advancements. This is a similar subject, and it might take us a couple of years to really be comfortable that, you know, but what I want to see is what's, you know, is it, do we need to be 250 or 50? What is the difference? I want to make sure, I guess I need to see it to make sure that it's not a contingent, it's not fund balance on top of fund balance. I feel like that's what I want, and maybe, is that a little of your concern, is that it's?
Right, so that's what I mean, where we project out the end of '24, is that gonna be a positive or negative fund balance? If it's positive, that goes towards or eliminates the 250.
Right.
So that you're not doubling, right?
That's what,
Yeah.
reduce staff, reduce public work expenses, because of no snow, and increase interest is beyond budget. There's no way we're not over 50%.
I agree.
And historically, right, we have had times where we have found ourselves over that 50% fund balance, and we have taken specific one-time projects and we have brought that down with those specific projects, and maybe funding this is a time when that's what we do with that difference, is it's that one time. Well, rather than us using that additional for another project or funding some sort of a one-time, essentially if we have surplus and we aren't going to use a project to one-time spend that down, you're adding to fund balance, which helps build that contingency.
Right, that's the other list. So, because I mean, if we fund it, and then we go, oh, we have fund balance, so we can do a one-time project, that's where you get in the whole slush fund conversation, right?
Well, I mean, no, I would say, that's not a slush fund, that's a conversation where you said, hey, this project has been on our list that we've,
Well, I get that, I think this is a really slippery slope. I mean, if we're budgeting $250,000 to make sure we have a fund balance, that I don't think we need to do.
Yep.
And I was like, oh, we got a little extra in the kitty, that's the problem.
No, I.
Really bad optics.
And I think that was the concern of the public as well, that.
Well, that was never our intention.
No, I
think it
understand,
is,
I understand.
But I think it's just a slippery slope, right?
Well, but in that project, you're grabbing the project that's been forever on the list, and you're like, oh, fine, like let's fund this, let's do this.
No, I get it, and I mean, I've been a part of conversations like, hey, we got fund balance, let's do this thing. I think, you know, there's an opportunity, but I think it's just a really, really slippery slope.
I think it would be beneficial if we left it in until September 9th so that we could get those updated numbers, and then we could have, I think, a more robust conversation done. And then two, I assume we're gonna do a presentation for that Monday as well. And I think if there was more of a description as to what that fund is for the public's sake, and I think everyone's, since this is the first time we're seeing it, I think it'd be very helpful, because you can talk all day about it, but I think if there's a visual behind it, I think it'll help everyone with this conversation and with having the projected numbers.
So Kevin could put together a good chart.
To Hannah's point, I mean, it's easier to pull it off than it is to add it.
Right, I mean, that's kind of the, you know, again, from a philosophical approach. After your vote on September 23rd, you can only remove, you can't add, so how far do we wanna go and be comfortable before we remove something to know that we're not gonna need it? That's always the balance. Maybe you're comfortable now, maybe you're not, you know, I mean, that's the direction that we'll look for. So we'll bring back some more information at the 9th. I know we're getting close to 2 hours, so I'm just gonna say it right now, we're not gonna get through the utility funds tonight. But let's make sure we finish up general fund. Mayor, do we want to tackle parks a little bit more? Because I'm not feeling like staff got direction on that, so.
I think before we transition to parks, can we just do some nodding of heads? We had a fair amount of discussion tonight about the EDA position, but is everyone comfortable with the 2 CSO officers and then the training captain position as well? Are we comfortable on those or any further?
So this is somewhat related, but not, in your weekly report on Friday, you mentioned that we're not gonna putting a hold on hiring the
Administrative
administrators,
services.
yes. What exactly happened there? And it's somewhat related because it's head counting. Is that something that just kind of interested in that?
Oh, you asked me these questions here, not call me.
Okay, I
I think.
it just came to my mind now.
I think, there wasn't consensus on a candidate to move forward, and I think, again, this position will work really closely with your city administrator, and I said it in the beginning, and then we kind of had this pivot, turn, detour, whatever we're on right now with the city administrator. And in fact, one of the candidates even asked us about that, and so I just think that the position is absolutely needed. I'm not saying you shouldn't do it. It's really important you find the right person, right? This is supposed to be a 75% roughly HR position. It needs to be somebody that's strong in HR. It needs to be somebody that gets along with our team. All of those things, we just didn't have it. And I think we wait till that administrator's on board, so we know what they're looking for, and then maybe there's a bigger push.
So to your answer, your question,
That was not at all what I asked, but then.
Oh, I thought, I was like, isn't that answer?
yeah, no, mine, what you're
Training
about.
training captain, CSOs, we've mentioned it a couple of times tonight. Is anyone having ink of those positions? Are we feeling like they should be funded?
I'm comfortable keeping them on. I'd like to see them funded. We've talked about CSOs for the 4 years I think I've been on council. And EDA, I think what you said earlier in that we want to see economic development happen within the city. I think the EDA position is needed and necessary to see that growth happen. And then the training position, fingers crossed that we get the grant, but I'm also of the mindset when I look at budgets, knowing that our preliminary budget is the highest we can go, we can always bring it down in December. I'm of the mindset that, and we've done it for the whole time I've been on council, where we usually do come down after the preliminary budget anyways. And starting at the 13%, I'm comfortable with those 3 positions being on there for now.
And one thing I'm not sure if we mentioned here, we talked about it at the fire board, even if you don't get the grant for the training captain and you still want to move forward with that position, there'll be some reduction because we'll need to have internal equity. And so right now it's budgeted at a grade 12 and we would budget it it's budgeted at a grade 15 and we would budget it at a 12. So I think we can make that update for sure for the September 9th meeting as well. The other thing that's not in here is the parks coordinator position that you approved last week. That's another $30,000 that will come out of here. So I think Kevin was on vacation last week, so we kind of had to make some assumptions before that, but now that we have more information, we can update that for the September 9th meeting as well.
Other thoughts, questions, concerns specific to
It's
position?
just, I'm comfortable with the CSOs, the training captain, see where that lands. That EDA/airport man, I'm just not 100% sold on that. I'm not saying that's not needed, but how could that look differently? I mean, is it having continuing on the conversation about that position, maybe what that might look like, but.
How would you want it to look differently when you say that?
Well, I know you understand, you talk about this person bringing more economic development to the city, but I go back to, we have three more people in that department.
Maybe we didn't convey that right. It's not that this person is more economic development directed, it's to free up your community development director's time to do more economic development.
Yes, I understand that. And
I'm gonna push back though, Councilor Roberts, because yeah, we have one in there, but we've also heard time and again from developers, both residential and commercial, that they just skip right by Forest Lake because we're so hard to work with. I mean, I can't imagine a world where we go back to that and just have that same thing happen for the next decade. Now, I mean, I see this role kind of the way you described, where it's an investment, right? I mean, there's gotta be an ROI to spend that money. And we should see that. I would say, 18 to 24 months, we start to see some inklings of that. Because it would be what wasn't getting us there. And now, well, also those people are taking care of our code enforcement, which hadn't been done.
So when you say it takes weeks to get back to developers, I think you made the comment, right? Is that because we're just that short-staffed in that department?
I'm not entirely sure why.
Okay, so that's my concerns. We're gonna add more staff to what, just to try to plug a hole and make sure we're getting back to developers sooner? I don't know. I'm happy to continue the conversation, but that'd be the one thing I have a little angst about, out of all the positions that are being suggested.
And of all of them, I think that probably has the smallest impact on the general fund, because you get to
It's still headcount, but, yeah, I get that.
I mean, would you be more open to us pursuing a code enforcement officer instead of this position? Because we know there's a challenge there, and instead of asking for all these different positions, I'm trying to, again, figure out how we put that together. If you don't hire this position, who's staffing the airport? And working with that contractor? Is that something you want to continue to expect of your city administrator to do? Is that where that position should be focused? And so, not to challenge you, but I will, right? Because I want to get down to what it is you'd like to see. That's why I do need to challenge you. But, what, if you don't like it, tell me how to solve these problems.
Staff knows challenges council members too, so.
I think I guess that's what I would say. If you're not sold on this, we're open to ideas, but tell us then how we provide those services internally and externally to
Let me
folks.
get back to that.
Okay, go check with your people.
So the Joint Fire Board had a lot of conversation about the staffing model of the fire department and doing all that we can to, kind of preserve but to actively and be aggressive in preserving our paid-on-call model. This position was, this position for the training captain was very much aligned with that. I think the original request came in that started as 2 positions, and we've switched that to make it just 1. If we're still a little lukewarm on this, I think we should identify what's needed, and what.
Mayor, I might even add a little more history too, that might make sense. I think maybe last year it was a deputy chief. I kind of came in and said, no, that's too much. So we have knocked it down, and I only want to share that because, again, much like the CSOs and other positions, staff has been asking for these for quite some time, and so we're trying to find what is the council's comfort level? How can we make this work? That is something you're comfortable with, and staff is getting what they need in order to do this. So this was, initially a deputy chief. You probably would have heard last year. It's down to a training captain. It's not somebody you can just pull from the paid on call who only shows up, a few hours out of the year to respond to those calls. This needs to be somebody, in the office, totally different than that. So and as much as we know how many bazillions of hours Chief Newman puts in, what do we do when he gets hit by a bus, right, or something, or he decides to retire, or the other thing from the DDA study was about identifying those second-in-commands and doing that succession planning. So I just want to throw that out there as another last pitch for why we think this position is important.
Yeah, and just piggybacking on those comments just a little bit, the chief assures us all the time, and us, Joint Fire Board, in these meetings, that if he were to be hit by a bus, fire response, the fire department is very well equipped and has the depth of fire response. Things would continue on wonderfully. I would say, he does a great job of leadership, and so maybe not for a long time, but that would be covered. The part in that hole that we just need some additional body to backfill is the entire administrative side. He is a one-person department, that he is the only person that does a lot of the administrative work of running a fire department. And so having a number 2 there is, I think we're beyond time of needing some additional coverage. He does a wonderful job, he works a lot of hours, but also at some point he will want to retire, and us not having, decades of fire department knowledge with one person probably serves us well. So if we have an opportunity to do that with a grant, great, but even if we don't get that grant, I think we should still make the investment. So there's my pitch. Should we talk about parks?
All right, yeah, I'm hearing we're keeping all the staff positions in there for now. And then, yeah, parks was the other thing that got brought up multiple times tonight. So I'm looking for direction from council if there's any more information you need, any direction you want to give to staff, to bring back anything different at the September 9th meeting with respect to parks.
But can I just ask one question? And I don't recall who did this last year, but this idea of an open house for this budget, I think we did last year, if I remember
did.
correctly.
I think we just had it tonight.
Well, I mean, this was a great turnout. This is what we wanted. We wanted this feedback. And so if there is an opportunity to do an open house, and present some of this and list out some of these parks on.
You have to do your work first, and then we're gonna get to that. So give me direction on the budget, and then we'll get back to open house. Just in case you all were wondering how much I have to
I mean,
keep.
I guess it got brought up a lot. People like that number is like, wow, that is a huge increase. So the more we can educate people on that, and you did a nice job doing so for the most part here today, but I'm sure, but just a bigger picture, maybe some mention picture.
So I'm hearing you say you support all the funding for parks, and we just need to tell the story better.
I have several concerns on the funding, digging into the funding side of it. Looking out 10 years, us doing the size of project that's currently contemplated in our 10-year plan on Tower Park, I'm not sure it's needed. I'm not sure we're financially ready for it.
So it's a $3 million project for those who might not remember.
And it's currently slotted for what you?
2031.
2031, okay. Sounds like that's 20 years from now. Oh, it's not. So it's a big number that's currently sitting in that 10-year plan that, to me, there are schools in that area. There's a lot of moving pieces potentially with Public Works on what's happening there. It just feels like a lot in an area that is just really unvetted. If you look at the timeline, even of just what's happened with Belts Park, we're just not gonna be ready to do that project then. And if that either provides some relief overall, if we wanted to take that path, or provides more funding for other projects, we've got the shoreline study or the shoreline work that is kind of newer to the conversation. That Tower Park just is a glaring, I'm not sure that's going to happen.
So are we thinking we should take it out? Are we thinking we should push it further beyond 10 years?
Could be a conversation for the Parks Board.
That is not allowed, it's not allowed. You have to make a decision, you're the elected folks, you don't have a Parks Board, Hannah. We gotta make these decisions before that Parks Board gets seated, right? So,
With that
in a
being
perfect world,
said,
yes.
then I'd say push it out. I wouldn't just scrap it, but maybe push it out till we have some time for the public to vet this. We're the elected officials, but it's not just our decision, it's what the people want, and so more time, instead of just taking it completely out, I'd be more comfortable with allowing them for that extra time.
I think there's more necessities too compared to that park. Like we always hear, of course, Belts Park, and then of course Fenway. Like Fenway, they could be doing tournaments there where people are coming in from out of town, spending money here, they're going to restaurant shopping and all of that. So I think pushing it out would be a better idea so that we can get more knowledge behind that decision and prioritize a little bit better.
So when you say push out, should we push it beyond the 10 years so it's not included in the financial projections that Kevin's using? Is that fair?
That's what I would propose. I don't know if there's a single person that can tell me how this project got on that list. And so is the community going to be disappointed that we might put a pause on Tower Park? I'm not sure that Susan's raising her hand and saying maybe she's, but.
Once upon a time, long ago, that was to be the city's dog park. Instead of where Dave maintains the area for the dog park at the end of the airport. All right?
Do you know you do that?
Well, it gets mowed.
Yeah.
There's a mowing period that every once in a while mows it. And that is considered to be the city's dog park, but long ago and far away.
So somehow we went from dog park to $3 million.
Well, you asked where it came from.
Yeah, okay.
And as part of doing a dog park there, and you needed some picnic tables, and you needed the fencing, and you needed to deal with the drainage and the watershed district and the yada, yada, yada. But that was long ago and far away.
What else was in the 3 million?
3 million was filling in all the blanks from the Parks Master Plan. So we'll be redoing the hockey rinks, but then you convert the insides of them to tennis courts and pickleball courts for summertime use. There was a splash pad, there was a whole bunch of ADA compliant playground areas. It was a big parking lot that attached to Harwood Creek Trail for pedestrian connections between all the multi-unit housing. Increased community gardens, I think it was like 3 or 4 multi-use fields, and maybe a softball field all wedged in. So it was the accurate number of taking numbers from other things to put it all in there, and it was, there's nothing in the middle of town that's connected right to the Harwood Creek Trail, so that was the kind of the plan of if you're gonna sell that, or that building's gonna leave, to not sell it off and make another apartment building, to make it a very big park that's connected right to a massive regional trail.
And I'm not, what you just said sounds lovely, I just don't think we're ready for it in the next.
So we'll push it to 2035, so then we can revisit next year with the Parks Commission meeting.
Yeah, perfect.
Other parks feedback, I mean, this is tough.
Do you have the list to put up, or maybe people have it in front of you? Again, it's page 89 in your packet, for those of you that have it. Belts, so next week, council will be asked to approve a 1-year extension request to the DNR, so we can continue to evaluate that. Again, unless you don't want to, let us know sooner than later. Otherwise, it's mostly just keeping up with the parks that we have, right, Dave, and replacing what's there.
Yeah, one of the big tickets on is the Castle irrigation, and at some point that's gonna need to get done, and you can move it from year to year, but it's a big ticket. Other, all the rest is deferred maintenance except for Tower Park and then Benwood Park.
In council, I hear the feedback on needing park board seated and needing that feedback on specific projects. I 1000% agree with that. I think whoever we have seated at that table though, is going to want some foundational level of, dollars for some of this equipment rehab that is in deferred maintenance that's in the 10-year plan. And so I think it's a question around appetite and how much of this how fast are we ready to kind of get beyond some of these deferred maintenance projects.
And correct me if I'm wrong, Dave, on this, but I know this was redone from even what was originally presented last year as what was deferred maintenance as far as what was committed for funding those. So I believe there were some parks that were past what we considered replacement, but even pushed out even farther for the dollars that were committed to fund those in regards to some park equipment, if I remember right. So if I went back to what was original to what we have now, there were some changes as far as maybe project scope or what year they happened, just to try to smooth some of those things out. So fiscal council is aware that these things are deferred. It's not just necessarily deferred a year or two, that they're deferred for quite a few years.
And I don't think moving them a year or two, as long as it stays within the 10 years, is gonna be impactful. To what that $500,000, $600,000 levy is, it would really be if you wanna take something out of this next 10 years like we just did with the Tower Park.
Where's the dog park for 100,000? Plan is to have that at future public works.
It's about 100,000.
100,000.
Fencing, we're gonna have extra acres there, and it's not around residential areas or parking there. It's kind of right next to where the walking path is now for the current dog parks. Big fence, a little bit fencing.
I'm sorry, Dave.
it's a little bit off topic of this and into a little bit about the community presentation, but I think back to some of the work that the school district did when they did their bond to push beyond some of their deferred maintenance projects on a lot of their buildings. I know we have some of this information already internally, and the Park Commission had done some work on kind of identifying some of those gaps of what is the current state of equipment and, how deferred are we on that deferred maintenance, but having some of those visuals, I think is needed for whatever we present to really show why is it. Somebody who doesn't know or isn't informed, you could look at this and say, wow, you're building a new park every 10 years. No, that's not it. It's really a lot of equipment upkeep. And so I think we just need to be clear that that is what the plan is.
Well, and that's only 10 years, so there's 10 years beyond that of the other 10 parks that'll end up on this list, plus the one we're building now that'll end up in that list. So there's 10 years that you're not even seeing that on the 20-year plan. There's a lot more coming. So it's not just, this is the only thing we have to deal with and then we don't have to worry about them for 20 years. It's continually happening.
Which I think goes back to that, getting to that base level of funding so you can continue to do it.
And also part of why let's maybe push the tower park off a bit and instead of build more new that also needs to be maintained. Do some catch up on a lot of these are neighborhood parks.
So these are the ones that are, Kevin, correct me if I'm wrong, planned to be funded through park dedication, or this 500, 600,000 a year that we're gonna do. If you scroll up 2 pages to page 87, those are parks that we plan to borrow money for. So wouldn't impact anything in 25, but just so you kind of understand the difference. And I think most of these, are they new? Is that how we separated them out? We're gonna be doing something new at the park versus just replacing what's there, as far as why we bought for it rather than cash.
So looking at specifically 2026, it was just Lakeside Memorial Park Shoreline. That was a new initiative, that's a budget priority that was put in that didn't have a funding source, same with the boat launch. And then just looking at, if we're issuing debt that year, that Bayview Park seemed to fit in there too, this to kind of help the fund out a little bit without having the cash on hand. And then specifically it's looking at Fenway Park, just given a dollar amount, about 1.7 each year to have that amount of cash on hand to fund that redevelopment wasn't feasible. So the issue debt for that, and the same for Coulican Park improvements and park infield improvements. Tower Park last year was included in the plans, it's really far out, and it was a decision made that just given the unknown of when the public works facility would be built, if we build that into be funded with cash or debt, just like we talked tonight, we just kept it in as being funded without that, since it was far out there and kind of not knowing exactly what you're talking about this year. Is it gonna happen in 31? Is it gonna happen more like 34, 35?
We push out to 35, for example, does that change the need for next year's budget? As part of that jump to 500,000 is for fund balance, correct?
Some is for fund balance, and that's what I recommend, and that's going back to a previous point, even what Dave said, looking out 10 years. There's parks that should have been probably on this list in 2030, but got pushed back 5 years to try to balance this out or even this out. So that's where, depending on the direction we receive tonight, if we take Tower out of there, you can see what that's gonna do to the fund balance, but does not that now mean, okay, maybe we bump some of these other deferred parks that maybe should happen in 30 or 31 up to those years instead of doing those in 35, and then once you get a park to mission staff, we know what's going on with public works and what we want to do there. Okay, is Tower Park going to happen in 2035, and for what tower, is it going to happen at all? Or is it going to be to that $3 million scope, or is it going to be something else? And then hopefully have that decision soon enough, so then if we want to pay cash for it, we have multiple years to kind of maybe bump that up to help cover that, or depending on the scope of that. That's how I would envision this looking. I don't envision that the 500,000 changing. I think that if we get up to that level, there's a a lot of opportunity there to get the park fund going in a better direction sooner.
So if we jump to page 14, sorry to keep jumping around in the packet, but this is the park capital fund, and I think to get to your question, Councilmember Erickson, I would say it probably doesn't, because you'll see the last 3 years are negative. So if we take out the 1.5 or 1.3 million twice, now we just don't have to worry about going negative in those later years.
Correct, it opens up the possibilities for how you want to look at it. It's 26, if you keep going with it, maybe you don't have to necessarily bond that year. Like just taking this out and playing with it and going back to seeing what else is pushed back and deferred, I think it opens up the possibility for how we want to look at this fund, so.
And again, maybe we look at smoothing it out rather than going to 600,000 in 2025 and then down to 500,000. So maybe we can talk about this, Kevin, and come back with, maybe it's only 525 instead of 600 next year, but it continues at that level going forward.
And I think that's just where there's different ways that we can look at it.
I'm assuming though, from a tax impact to your taxpayers, though, we would want to try and smooth that out rather than have the jump. I agree. Okay.
What page on here shows the projected future year levy increase?
That is page 13.
Yeah.
Line 40 is the percentage increase.
So I think this financial management plan, this, if we're looking at that percentage levy increase, was last year's presented to as a high increase. And once we get to that base level where that funding needs to be, that's where you're starting to see those smaller percentage increases. 28 has a higher percent increase just because that's for the debt for the public works facility is the main driving cause for that increase. But to Christina's point, we want to get to that point where we're at the funding where we need to be and try to keep those any incremental increases smoothed out year over year.
Or at least know when it's coming.
Correct.
We need a new public works facility.
Yes.
Planning for that.
I think one thing that could benefit the conversation regarding parks is just painting that picture. I think we touched on it a little bit, but again, I think visuals, like incorporating something within a presentation for September 9th.
It's like pictures of the playground equipment that to kind of see the state, you mean, or what do you mean by pictures?
I'd say, yeah, pictures of the parks if possible, but regardless, I think maybe like the history of parks, like with what Mayor Bain said today, like I'm envisioning like a slide of like the history of parks, where we've been, what the goal is, and then maybe we could get a description of individually each park could have their own slide, and it could be like what are we spending this money on with this park. So I mean, it's like for next year it's the 4 for 2025, so it's like we could just talk about each one. I think it would paint that picture.
Well, you added that picture would be just, so why does a park the size of Bayview cost $500,000? And what are those state and federal requirements that are outside of our control? So we can't put up a 20-foot slide that's made out of metal if you burn an egg on someone's
Not
food.
anymore.
So, just paint that picture helpful. Because that's just hard to.
Yeah, I think for next time we could probably focus, well, belts is kind of up in the air, right? I don't know how much more time we need to spend on belts. I probably spent enough time this year, you guys spent time on it last year. As far as knowing what's going there, right? Because you talked about a bunch of things. But so then we have the Coolen Park infield improvements, Manor Park, and T-Box refurbishing, and we could get pictures of those and we can talk about what's gonna be approved. Just, I hear what you're saying, I'm just not sure we can build out the robust fund for everyone next time, but we can certainly focus on the 2025 projects.
Yeah, and I'm only bringing that one up because so many people were discussing parks and they weren't understanding what the goal is behind it. So I think if for our next meeting, we could just dive into that a little bit deeper so that when people do come, if we do post on the website, they can see that history and see what the plan is moving forward.
And somehow getting from the mind shift of the large increase to this is just gotta be built into the new normal. This is the baseline funding that's needed to have a maintained park system. The feedback is we don't wanna maintain a park system, that's a whole different conversation, but I think folks just don't understand the funding deficit that we're trying to get to overcome.
All right, anything else that we should be working on to bring back to you next time or direction to us to update things? The legal expenses was brought up, so I'll just address that one because I am the one who put the increase in. And again, it was based off the seeing that last year and this year you had over $100,000 in legal expenses each year. I think projecting like 127 or something by the end of this year. Obviously Amanda's been working on some extra work that she wouldn't do, whether it's the city administrator search. It also depends on if you get into lawsuits, right? Was it Forest Hills one that you had last year? That takes more time. And so I tried to kind of balance that out and went at 105, whereas you've been at 71 or 72,000, I think. So certainly, we could lower that down if council thinks there won't be special projects or plan to get into any lawsuits next year, plan to sue anybody for, the kind of stuff that we wouldn't need her for. I just looked at the numbers of actuals to kind of come up with that, so I just want to bring that one up, so.
This is an unusual year with just anytime city administrator is an open position and you're in an interim role, it's going to create some additional work for city attorney. I think we should look at it as hopefully a one-time, and kind of look to get to a more normalized rate or more normalized utilization.
So was 2022, you think, a normal year for you? Because I think it was like 73,000 or something in 22. It's just been the last 2 years.
I think she.
Or has it just been since Amanda came along, right? She came in 23.
Well, I also think with growth comes more legal questions and more pushback, more litigation.
Yeah, the code enforcement, public nuisance is the
Yeah.
stuff she's been saying.
Marijuana.
Yeah, cannabis stuff, yeah.
I guess we call it cannabis, I guess.
Oh, what it is.
Of all the things I called it, it was at least a more appropriate one, I reached one.
Let's see, we'll definitely add population numbers to that chart for comparable cities, it's not an issue.
On that comparable city, I remember this question last time, is White Bear comes in really low, larger city, but there's some kind of additional funding or revenue that they receive that most cities don't. Do you recall that?
Do they get local government aid?
They have a high dollar value for local government aid. I believe they receive like somewhere
I just saw it.
around 2 million, upper, higher than that, 2.5, something like that. That, I was interested in that one to see where they were coming in on that. I haven't looked at them closely this year, but I know with reading through their budget packet last year that they are having to address that decreasing LGA as it goes. The city, Forest Lake will receive about 53,000, 56,000 this year in that range, but that's going away. So.
What about White Bear Township? Those are separate entities.
Yeah, it's only, the township's like 12,000 people or something now. Honestly, now's not the time, but I feel like we should maybe revisit those comp cities. Hugo is only 15,000, are they, 16,000? I mean, even they're a lot smaller than us and don't have the same level of services as we do.
The last time we revisited this, the decision was made to include both, just because adjacent, and then also they tend to be numbers that the community is looking at. And so even if we would say, yes, they're really maybe outside of a perfect benchmark, it at least helps to, whether we're talking about park funding or, head count for, departments or whatever, it's at least one that having it on the page, there's usually somebody in the audience that's saying, well, in Hugo, and then at least we have that number that is
Let's
also
adopt the Hugo budgeting policy, can we? Do you know what it is? Flat tax rate. So when your values go up 23%, we could increase your taxes by 23%, right? I would love to have Hugo as our comp, not this year, because they're gonna go negative, but in both years. All right, well, I just, I think we see that, and I would, or we could,
But we can, I
and
don't
we can at
think,
least put the population on there for
and we
both.
can kind of decide at some point, is it time to revisit that?
Yeah, you'll revisit it when we do the class and comp study next year, that's a good
Yeah.
time, because we'll wanna make sure we're comparing ourselves to comparable schools.
Anyone else have anything that we haven't covered already this evening?
It's a small number, but the additional training for city council, are you telling us something?
I'm gonna double it for you.
I will say, I have been to that training, it is great, it is great training. If you haven't been, I recommend.
So the utilities we'll probably do at the September work session, maybe, I can't, I'm trying to think. We will have Lucius come back for the next 3 work sessions and start talking about the medians as well, the medians and roundabouts and the landscaping there, so that's another thing. We'll do that September, October, November, so maybe by December you might have a different number in there, although again, we've spread that cost over 10 years, so it will be minimal impact to 2025. So maybe we could do that and then also bring back the utility discussion that we didn't get to tonight. That's probably gonna be a full meeting. Is that okay with folks?
Workshop, or not workshop, but open house.
Oh, yeah. So,
We can talk about that tonight or do it on the 9th too. I
yeah,
guess.
let's talk about it tonight because it got brought up. So I think we had talked about it before, but we had understood that you wanted to do it. Just wanted to get some more thoughts on it, maybe middle of November, once we've kind of got some of this stuff ironed out. Do you want to do it in person? Do you want us to set up an online one? Because, there's, on the one hand, it's nice to have people in the room and you can have a conversation. On the other hand, if people can't come that night, then they miss it. Maybe there's an opportunity. I'm thinking of the county, how a lot of their road projects, they have online surveys. I think they call them online open houses. So what's the council's wish for how we move forward?
I personally think I'll do it in-house first.
Okay.
That's just me.
I agree. Can we do both?
No. You don't have enough staffing. Start the staffing discussion.
I mean,
we can-
materials
we
can
can
be
look into
posted
that,
online,
yeah.
right?
Yeah.
Like, you could,
We'll definitely post the stuff online, and I'm sure we can come up with a survey monkey or something to allow people to get feedback. We'll do it kind of middle of November, I'm thinking. Would you want, and then we would just bring it to you at your December truth and taxation meeting? Or are you thinking you need to have a meeting in between the open house to digest stuff?
we needed
Or you-
last year, we did, we,
We're gonna do better this year, Mayor. We're gonna-
you are right. I find we will want to talk about it.
Okay.
And
So maybe if we plan it for like the second week in November, we could have it at your second meeting in November as a discussion item. How does that sound? Staff, does that work?
I think we would all benefit from having that meeting cushion. Yes, I like the idea of let's be buttoned down sooner rather than later, and so we aren't pushing it into December, but we're gonna want to, at least as a council, have some, even if we were to just grab an hour in a special meeting after that workshop, maybe that's too early. Maybe that's an efficient use of everyone's time, is that same evening, let's just do a quick debrief.
I was gonna at least suggest having a little bit sooner, because if we have a couple weeks in between him, then you can maybe lose train of thought or whatnot. I think
Yeah.
maybe not that night, but if you do it that second week, if we just have the discussion at that workshop possibly.
Yeah, that's what I was gonna say. So what if we had the open house from like 5:30 to 6:30? And 6:30 is your normal work session. Again, we'll have Lucius there because we're planning for 3 meetings, but then we could also have the budget discussion, which maybe is a good time to wrap that all up.
Just do it all on the 18th.
Yeah, is that whatever the workshop day is in November? Would that work?
Yeah.
So we'll look for a special meeting from 5:30 to 6:30, is that, or did you have it for 2 hours last year? What do you want to do?
I hate to be this person, but I'm gonna be out of town. 18. Yeah,
Are you gonna be out that whole week or just that day?
that whole week.
Well, I don't know how to do it for you then.
Can't help
We'll
I'm not,
get the online set up for you.
I'm not saying I have to be there, I don't want to like force everyone to change, but I already know I'm gonna be out of town that week,
Or we could
so-
do it is it the 25th, the next Monday, the fourth Monday?
The
And then we could have the open house
I'm
an
out
hour
that
be-
day.
That's the week of Thanksgiving too, and I think we gotta be kind of conscientious of that.
Yeah.
Do we really need a budget open house? This is not a common thing
Is
that most
it-
cities do.
Should do it in October.
Do we do the budget open house before city council meeting on the 11th?
The 12th, because the 11th is a holiday. So we'll have a.
I like the idea of doing it before the council meeting on the 12th.
Okay. Like an hour before, kind of, an hour for the open house and go into the regular meeting and we can have a discussion item to follow up? Okay.
And you want it in person, I believe last year you had it for 2 hours.
Let's just do it 1 hour.
You just want to do 1 hour, so from 6 to 7?
Or 5:30 to 7, maybe? Is that cutting? 5:30, do it 5:30 to 7, and then we've got a hard cutoff with council meeting at 7?
Sure. You're gonna be out of town. You two are more sold out.
That'd be a workshop. Virtual.
Rock, paper, scissors.
It doesn't.
Are you out of town?
I'm scheduled to do a workshop. I'll figure it out.
All right, so as of now, we'll plan for November 12th, 5:30 to 7. And a follow-up discussion item on the council agenda that night. And we will do it in person, but we will post the materials online and set up a survey to allow folks to send us comments. See, that's the thing, I don't know, so when would we wanna run that? Do we wanna run that like the week before? And then you could have that at the meeting on the 12th?
Yes.
Yeah, I like that
Yes.
idea.
So,
The setup for that meeting, structure-wise, we had some things printed, like on what they're, like, kind of stations around the room, based on different topics, graphics. I thought that structure worked well.
sure, I'll
Did
let
we
you
have a
delete that
video
again.
last year?
We had it, I was just gonna say, did you like, we had a video last year that was set up in one of the conference rooms over here where people, I believe it was like 5 or 6 minutes long. That just kind of talked through things, there was a 2-page document that people could take with them. This is back to back, and then we just had, I believe, 6 different stations like parks, streets, operating like staff, or whatever, we would kind of go that route. And then they could come around and just ask questions specifically to that.
Do we have an ability to do a video? It seems like.
We paid a $5,000, $2,000.
Last year we had Paul from LATV help us with the voiceover.
Yeah.
And then we also contracted with a marketing company firm that helped make like the, so called slides or PDF that are on the TVs pretty, and then also the 2-page document with that. So if you want that format, we could look at doing some of that in-house. I could go and look and see how much that costs, that we actually paid them, I think it was somewhere around $5,000, I'm not sure. But we could go.
It's not the budget, we have to use fund balance, is that okay?
Is that, I don't recall.
I get punchy.
Did we put that video on the website? Could we, if we didn't?
Yeah, Paul
If we're
did.
gonna spend that kind of money, it'd be nice to get it out more, than
Yeah.
just people who come that.
Yeah, so I don't recall that we ended up paying Paul or LATV to do that. I don't think it was that much, but I know he did. I believe I still have the link last year that still works, that I looked at a couple weeks ago, so. It is something we can get a link for. I believe since last year, the decision was made a little bit late in the game to do this, that I believe I got that pretty much the morning of, to get that ready to go in the count, but I believe if it's something that we want to do, then get the voiceover, we have more time to prep, that we'd be able to get that ahead of time and get that posted online. Especially if you want to do that survey the week before, then that would be something I think would be beneficial to have that, that you could sit and listen to that. You could also have the 2-page document ready that they could read as well.
I think it's, a lot of moving parts. Stina's point, a lot of communities don't do this, but I think it's valuable to get the information out there.
Yeah, I just, I would say let's really make sure then, like, I'm assuming you did this based off your preliminary levy that was sent to the county, right? So that it kind of matched up what people were getting in their mailbox. And so really encourage council to make those decisions at the September 23rd meeting. So that there's not changes that are inconsistent with what they're seeing, right? So.
Yeah, to Christine's point, that's as well, I was gonna say, if we're gonna do this with that, even to get those numbers, I can get a hold of people and get them going on that. Because even some numbers change with this, that even September 9th, for sure by 23rd, that's kind of where we want to land.
All right, ready to wrap up? Anything else? Not hearing anything? I will entertain a motion to adjourn.
So
Motion, is there a second? Motion and a second. All those in favor signal by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, and we're adjourned. Thank you, everyone.
Did you wait?